Welcome back. Tonight, we're going through the story of Five Nights at Freddy's. Let's begin. The complete Five Nights at Freddy's story, the beginning of tragedy. The story begins in the early 1980 seconds with a man named William Afton and his business partner Henry Emily. These two men shared a dream of creating family entertainment through animatronic characters that could sing, dance, and bring joy to children. Together, they founded Fredbear's Family Diner, a small restaurant featuring two Springlock animatronic suits. Fredbear, a golden bear, and Spring Bonnie, a golden rabbit. These Springlock suits were remarkable for their dual purpose. They could function as animated robots on stage, but could also be worn by employees as costumes when the animatronic parts were carefully wound back and locked into place. William Afton had a family of his own. He had a daughter and at least two sons. The younger son was a timid child who became terrified of the animatronics after witnessing something disturbing. His older brother and his friends frequently tormented him, wearing masks of the animatronic characters to frighten him. The younger son carried a golden Fredbear plush toy everywhere, finding some comfort in it despite his overwhelming fear of the actual animatronics. The family dynamic was troubled. William Afton was often absent or inattentive, and the older brother's bullying grew increasingly cruel. The younger son had nightmares every night, vivid, horrifying visions of the animatronics coming to life in twisted, monstrous forms. In his dreams, his bedroom became a prison where he had to survive against nightmarish versions of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. A tiny version of Fredbear appeared in various locations throughout the house in these nightmares. Even worse, a massive, grotesque version of Fredbear with sharp teeth and a gaping stomach cavity lurked in the closet and hallways. These nightmares reflected the deep psychological trauma the child experienced daily. His fear was not irrational, it was born from constant torment and perhaps from witnessing something he should never have seen. The Fredbear plush seemed to talk to him, offering cryptic comfort and promises that he would be put back together. The tension in this young boy's life reached its terrible climax during his birthday party at Fredbear's Family Diner in 1983. His older brother and his friends decided to play their cruelest prank yet. They grabbed the crying, terrified younger brother and carried him toward the stage where the animatronics performed. Despite his screams and pleas, they lifted him up toward Fredbear's mouth, intending to give him a kiss from the animatronic bear as a joke. What happened next would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. As they shoved the boy's head into Fredbear's mouth, the Springlock mechanisms failed catastrophically. The animatronic endoskeleton parts that had been carefully wound back suddenly snapped forward with tremendous force. The child's head was crushed in Fredbear's jaws. The bite was devastating and immediately fatal. Blood spread across the floor as party guests screamed. The older brother stood frozen in horror at what he had caused. The child's last moments were strange and surreal. He lay in what might have been a hospital, or perhaps somewhere between life and death. The Fredbear plush spoke to him, along with other plush toys of the characters. They promised him rest, promised that the pieces would be put back together. Then darkness came. This event became known as the Bite of '83. It destroyed what remained of William Afton's family and changed the trajectory of his life forever. Whether this tragedy broke something in William that was already damaged, or whether it created something new and monstrous within him, the result was the same. William Afton began to harbor dark thoughts about life, death, and what might lie beyond the partner's loss. Henry Emily also had a daughter, a young girl with dark hair who loved the animatronics her father created. She was kind and gentle, often found near the restaurant where her father worked, but William Afton's descent into darkness would soon touch Henry's family in the most devastating way imaginable. One day, Henry's daughter found herself locked outside one of the restaurant locations. Children inside were having a party, and she stood alone outside, crying. A figure appeared, someone in a Spring Bonnie costume. But this was not a friendly employee entertaining children. Inside the golden rabbit suit was William Afton, and his intentions were murderous. Afton lured the girl to a back area or alley. There, he killed her, taking the life of his business partner's only child. The little girl's body was left near trash bins in the rain. But something unexpected happened. The security puppet, an animatronic designed to protect children and keep them safe, had been locked in its prize box by a child placing a box on top of it. When it finally freed itself, it emerged into the rain and found the dead girl lying motionless. The puppet crawled to her body and collapsed beside her. In that moment, something supernatural occurred. The little girl's spirit, her life force, her very essence, fused with the puppet animatronic. She did not find peace. She did not move on. Instead, she became bound to the mechanical puppet, aware and conscious inside its shell. This was the first possession, the first time a murdered child's soul became trapped inside an animatronic. The girl, now the puppet, would remain conscious and aware for decades to come. She remembered her death. She remembered her father, Henry, and she would play a crucial role in the events that followed. The missing children incident, William Afton discovered something from his daughter's death and from what happened to Henry's daughter. He learned that under certain circumstances, a human soul could be bound to an animatronic. This knowledge fascinated him. Whether driven by a desire to bring back his own son, by pure scientific curiosity about life after death, or by something far darker, Afton became obsessed with this phenomenon. He began to experiment, and his experiments required victims. Sometime in the mid-1980 seconds, a new restaurant opened, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This location featured 4 main animatronic characters. Freddy Fazbear was the brown bear mascot, the leader of the band. Bonnie was a purple rabbit with a red bow tie, who played guitar. Chica was a yellow chicken with a bib reading "Let's Eat," who carried a cupcake named Carl. Foxy was a red fox pirate with an eye patch and a hook hand, who performed in his own separate area called Pirate Cove. These animatronics were more advanced than the spring lock suits, designed purely as robots rather than wearable costumes. William Afton used his knowledge of the restaurant and his access to the Spring Bonnie costume to enact a terrible plan. He lured 5 children away from their families and into a back room. The children trusted the person in the friendly yellow rabbit costume. Once he had them isolated, Afton murdered all 5 children. Their bodies were hidden, and their disappearances launched a massive investigation that went nowhere. The children's names were later revealed to include Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy, though the restaurant management never released this information publicly. The puppet, still possessed by Henry's daughter, sensed what had happened. She found the bodies of the 5 murdered children and the 4 main animatronic characters. Driven by something between vengeance and mercy, the puppet placed the children's bodies into the animatronic suits of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. Through supernatural means similar to what had bound her own soul, the children's spirits became attached to the animatronics. Gabriel possessed Freddy Fazbear. Jeremy possessed Bonnie. Susie possessed Chica. Fritz possessed Foxy. The 5th child, Cassidy, possessed a 5th animatronic, a golden Freddy suit that was kept in the back room. This golden Freddy was another springlock suit like the Spring Bonnie that Afton used for his murders. Cassidy's possession of this suit was different from the others, more unstable and more powerful. Golden Freddy could appear and disappear, could manifest in ways the other animatronics could not. The rage and pain of this child's death seemed to fuel supernatural abilities beyond normal possession. The 5 children's spirits remained trapped in the animatronics, unable to move on, unable to rest. They had no memory of who killed them. They had been murdered while the person wore a mascot costume. So in their confused, dead minds, they associated their killer with employees, with people who worked at the restaurant. This confusion would have deadly consequences. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza tried to continue operating despite the disappearances. The investigation went cold when no bodies were discovered and no suspects were identified. But the restaurant staff began noticing disturbing behavior from the animatronics. During the day, they performed normally, but at night, they would move on their own. They would walk the halls. Their eyes would follow people. The animatronics had become possessed by the murdered children, and those children saw employees as potential threats or as connected to their killer, the first night guard. Years passed after the missing children incident. The original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location remained operational despite the dark history everyone tried to forget. By 1993, the restaurant was showing its age. The animatronics were worn, their movements were jerky, and they smelled faintly of decay. A rumor spread among staff that the smell came from mucus and blood leaking from the suits, though management insisted this was just moisture from the old electronics and fabric. The restaurant needed night security guards. The position had remarkable turnover. The job was simple on paper. Sit in a small security office from midnight until 6 in the morning, monitor cameras showing different rooms throughout the building, and make sure nothing was stolen or vandalized. The pay was low, about $120 for a week of overnight shifts. The phone messages from the previous guard suggested the animatronics tended to wander at night, but this was framed as normal behavior due to their free roaming mode keeping their servos from locking up. A man named Mike Schmidt took the night guard position. His first night began quietly. The security office was cramped, with 2 doors on either side leading to hallways, a desk with a fan, and a small monitor showing camera feeds, and nothing else. The previous guard had left phone messages explaining the basics. The animatronics were in free roaming mode at night. If they entered the office, they would likely try to stuff any person they found into a spare Freddy Fazbear suit stored in the back. Since the suits were filled with metal endoskeletons and wiring, being stuffed inside one would be fatal. The guard explained that Mike should monitor the cameras and use lights to check the hallways outside each door. If an animatronic approached, Mike should close the door immediately. However, the power supply to the office was limited. Using the cameras, lights, and doors all consumed power from a battery that had to last until 6 in the morning. Running out of power meant complete darkness, and disabled doors a death sentence. That first night, Mike experienced what would become a recurring nightmare. Bonnie and Chica left the main stage early and began wandering through the rooms. Foxy stayed behind his curtain in Pirate Cove, but would occasionally peek out, becoming more active if not watched regularly. Freddy remained mostly stationary, but occasionally moved through the rooms, his glowing eyes visible in the darkness. The animatronics moved with clear intent. When they approached the office, they would stand in the doorway, staring. Their eyes glowed in the dark white pupils in black sockets. Bonnie approached from the left, often moving quickly through the supply closet and down the left hall. Chica came from the right, sometimes standing in the kitchen where her movements could only be detected by the sound of pots and pans clattering. Foxy required special attention. If not monitored frequently through the camera on Pirate Cove, he would become active and sprint down the left hallway. The player would hear the sound of his footsteps running on metal. Closing the left door before he arrived was essential if caught. Foxy would jump scare and presumably kill the night guard. Mike survived that first night through careful power management and quick reflexes. When 6 a.m. arrived, the animatronics immediately returned to their places, becoming docile the moment daylight came. Over the following nights, the animatronics became more aggressive. Freddy became more active, his laugh echoing through the building. Golden Freddy occasionally appeared, a slumped, golden version of Freddy sitting in the office itself. Its appearance triggering an immediate jump scare and game over. The phone messages from the previous guard became increasingly concerning. He mentioned that the animatronics were trying to find where the people went at night. He explained the bite of 87, an incident where an animatronic bit someone's frontal lobe, causing the victim to lose the ability to speak. The guard mused that it was amazing the victim lived without their frontal lobe. By the 4th night, the phone call was just disturbing noises, moaning, groaning, sounds that might have been the previous guard being attacked. The 5th night was the most intense. All animatronics were extremely active. Freddy moved aggressively through the building, his pattern taking him through the East Hall corner, right to the office door. Foxy ran constantly. Bonnie and Chica attacked relentlessly. Power management became nearly impossible. But Mike survived. After completing 5 nights, Mike received a small paycheck and congratulations on finishing the week. But then, a 6th night became available, even more difficult. After surviving that, A seventh custom night allowed Mike to adjust the difficulty of each animatronic. Throughout it all, the truth remained hidden. Mike did not know about the dead children. He did not know about William Afton. He knew only that the animatronics were trying to kill him and that he had to survive until morning. The newspaper clippings visible in the background told more of the story. They referenced the missing children from years earlier. They mentioned the restaurant being closed for an investigation before reopening. They noted that the animatronics were no longer allowed to walk around during the day. The pieces of the tragedy were there, but Mike likely never assembled them into the full picture. He survived his week and moved on, never knowing that the animatronics trying to kill him were possessed by murdered children who mistook him for their killer. A new beginning in old sins. Before the events at the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in 1993, the company attempted to rebuild its reputation and start fresh. In 1987, a new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location opened with a larger building, more attractions, and redesigned animatronics. This location featured updated versions of the classic characters called the Toy Animatronics. Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, and Toy Chica were colorful, modern, child-friendly versions with rounder features and bright eyes. A new character named Balloon Boy was added, a small animatronic child holding balloons and a sign. The Mangle, a white and pink fox animatronic, was featured in Kids Cove as a take-apart and put-back-together attraction, though children damaged it so frequently that staff eventually gave up on repairs, leaving it in a mangled state of disassembled parts. The old animatronics from the previous location were also brought to this new restaurant. The original Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy were kept in a back room, stripped for parts to help maintain the new toy versions. These withered animatronics were in terrible condition. Bonnie's face was missing, Chica's arms were bare endoskeleton, Foxy was severely damaged, and Freddy looked worn and decayed. But they were still active. The souls of the murdered children remained bound to these suits, still conscious, still angry, still confused about their purpose. A new security guard was hired for the night shift at this location. Like Mike Schmidt, years later, this guard worked from midnight to 6 a.m., monitoring cameras and trying to survive. But this location had even more threats. The toy animatronics were all active at night, moving through the building. The withered animatronics also roamed, crawling from their storage room to wander the halls. The puppet was kept in a prize corner, locked in a music box that had to be wound regularly through the camera system. If the music box wound down completely, the puppet would emerge and make its way to the office, resulting in an unavoidable death. The guard had no doors to protect himself this time. Instead, he had a Freddy Fazbear mask, an empty costume head he could wear. The toy animatronics were designed with facial recognition software to detect criminals. But this technology also meant they could be fooled by the mask. When an animatronic entered the office, putting on the mask would make them think the guard was an animatronic too, causing them to eventually leave. However, Foxy and the puppet could not be fooled this way. The phone messages at this location provided more context. The guard learned that the toy animatronics had been acting aggressively toward adults, but were fine with children. Management had linked them to a criminal database, which might explain their hostility. The previous guard had been moved to the day shift after something happened during his night shifts. References were made to someone using one of the old mascot costumes, the yellow suit from the back room. As the week progressed, the situation deteriorated. The animatronics became more aggressive each night. The puppet's music box wound down faster, requiring constant attention. The withered animatronics moved more frequently, their damaged forms appearing in the office with disturbing regularity. Golden Freddy, or a version of it, appeared occasionally as a slumped suit in the office, still possessing the ability to trigger instant death. During the day shift at this restaurant, something terrible happened. William Afton returned. He gained access to the building and donned the old Spring Bonnie costume once again. He lured and murdered more children, at least 5 more victims. The toy animatronics with their facial recognition software may have caught him on video. The puppet, still possessed by Henry's daughter, once again tried to save the children's souls by placing them into animatronic bodies. But these children were placed into the withered animatronics, the ones already possessed by the previous victims, creating a confused tangle of souls and rage. The investigation following these new murders resulted in the new location being closed. The toy animatronics were scrapped, torn apart, and destroyed. The withered animatronics were kept in storage for potential future use. The company's reputation was in shambles. The guard survived his week, but the restaurant did not. The final paycheck showed a date in November 1987, and the newspaper clippings announced the restaurant's closure. One mentioned that the restaurant would be closed, and that the animatronics might find use at a smaller location later on. One detail from the phone messages stood out. On one of the later nights, the phone guy mentioned something about an incident during the day shift, something involving a bite. He said, someone used one of the older costumes, and that yellow one had been moved to a safe room. This was the bite of 87 mentioned in the first location. An animatronic had bitten someone's frontal lobe during the day shift. Whether this was caused by one of the possessed animatronics attacking an employee or by the animatronics detecting William Afton in his costume and attacking him was never made clear. But the result was catastrophic for the company and led to strict rules about animatronics not being allowed to walk around during the day. William Afton's reckoning. After the closure of the 1,987 location, years passed. The original 1,993 restaurant operated and eventually closed. The company's reputation was destroyed. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza became synonymous with missing children and danger. The location sat abandoned, the animatronics left to decay in empty buildings, but the souls of the murdered children remained trapped. They were still bound to the animatronic suits, still conscious, still suffering in a half-life of mechanical imprisonment. And William Afton, the purple guy, the murderer responsible for everything, remained free. He had never been caught, he had never been punished. At some point, Afton returned to one of the abandoned restaurant locations. His motivations were unclear. Perhaps he wanted to collect evidence. Perhaps he was drawn back by some compulsion. Perhaps he wanted to examine the animatronics to understand the possession phenomenon he had caused. Whatever his reason, entering that building was his final and fatal mistake. The animatronics detected him. The spirits of the murdered children, trapped for so many years, somehow recognized him. After all the confusion, after all the misdirected anger at innocent night guards, they finally found the man who had actually killed them. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy cornered William Afton in the building. He ran through the rooms, the animatronics pursuing him with single-minded determination. These were not the slow, lurching movements they showed to night guards. This was focused rage from children who finally found their murderer. Afton fled into a back room, a safe room that was not visible on any camera system or floor plan. These safe rooms were hidden areas where employees could go during emergencies, places where the animatronics programming prevented them from entering. Inside this room sat several old animatronic parts and one complete spring-lock suit, the Spring Bonnie costume Afton had used for his murders. Cornered and desperate, Afton made a calculated decision. He knew the spirits were possessing the animatronic bodies. He believed that putting on an animatronic suit might confuse them or make them unable to hurt him. He climbed into the Spring Bonnie suit, the same golden rabbit costume he had worn while killing their physical bodies. He laughed at the children's spirits as they hesitated at the door of the safe room. But the room was old, abandoned, and neglected. The ceiling leaked. Water dripped from above, falling onto the spring-lock suit. The spring-lock mechanisms, already old and corroded, were sensitive to moisture and sudden movements. As drops hit the suit and as Afton moved inside it, the locks began to fail. The spring lock failure was catastrophic. Every single lock snapped at once. The animatronic endoskeleton parts that had been carefully wound back suddenly released with enormous force. Metal beams slammed into Afton's body from every direction. Springs punctured his flesh. Metal rods impaled him through the chest, arms, and legs. His ribcage was crushed. His internal organs were punctured by dozens of metal points. The suit's jaw snapped shut, metal teeth driving through his face. William Afton screamed in agony, but the damage was too severe. Blood poured from hundreds of wounds, soaking into the suit's fabric. He collapsed against the wall, the spring Bonnie costume, now his tomb. Death should have come quickly, but somehow it did not. Whether through sheer force of will, through the supernatural properties of the spring-locked suit after so many murders had been committed while wearing it, or through the same phenomenon that bound children's souls to animatronics, William Afton did not fully die. He remained conscious inside the suit. He was trapped inside the spring Bonnie costume, his corpse fused with the mechanical parts, his soul bound to the animatronic in the same way his victims' souls were bound. But unlike the children who possessed the other animatronics, Afton retained his full memories and intelligence. He knew exactly what had happened to him. He understood that he had become the very thing he had used to trap children's souls, a walking corpse inside an animatronic suit. The safe room was sealed. Whether this was done deliberately by someone who knew what had happened or simply part of closing the location, the room was boarded up and hidden behind a false wall. William Afton, now Springtrap, remained sealed inside that dark room for 30 years. He was immobile, unable to free himself, trapped in darkness with nothing but his memories and the agony of his mangled body fused with machinery. The children's spirits, perhaps satisfied that their killer had finally been punished, finally found some measure of peace, and moved on from their animatronic prisons. Horror attraction. 30 years after the sealing of the safe room, in the year 2023, the tragic history of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza had faded into urban legend. The murders, the missing children, the haunted animatronics, they were now the stuff of internet forums and horror story collections. Someone decided this dark history could be exploited for profit. An entrepreneur developed plans for a horror attraction based on the legends of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, calling it Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction. The attraction was built as a walk-through haunted house experience. The developers tried to make it as authentic as possible, using actual props and decorations from the old restaurants. They contacted the previous restaurant locations and purchased old arcade machines, decorations, and whatever relics remained. They even acquired some of the old animatronic parts, heads, arms, and shells from the destroyed characters. These were set up as static props throughout the attraction. As the attraction neared its opening date, the developers hired a night guard to watch the building and ensure nothing was stolen or vandalized during the final setup phase. This guard worked from midnight to 6 a.m., monitoring cameras showing different rooms throughout the building. The rooms were decorated with children's drawings, old posters, and the creepy ambiance of an abandoned restaurant. The old animatronic parts were positioned throughout Freddy's head on a barrel, Chica's head mounted on a table. The phone messages from one of the developers revealed an exciting discovery. While exploring one of the old restaurant locations, they found a sealed safe room that was not on the floor plans. Inside, they discovered an intact animatronic suit, a yellow rabbit that had been boarded up inside the room for decades. This find was perfect for the attraction. They brought Springtrap, though they did not know that name, back to Fazbear's Fright and set it up as the centerpiece of their horror attraction. But Springtrap was not a prop. Inside that rotted, decayed Spring Bonnie suit was the corpse of William Afton, and his soul was still bound to it. After 30 years of darkness, Springtrap found himself in a new location with power running through the building. He could move again. And there was a person working here, a guard, sitting alone in an office at night. For reasons known only to Afton's twisted mind, he began to move through the attraction, hunting the night guard. The first night was quiet. The guard monitored cameras, showing rooms decorated like the old restaurants. Springtrap appeared on camera occasionally, but did not move. The atmosphere was unsettling, realistic decorations mixed with actual relics from a place where children had died. The guard survived easily. On the second night, Springtrap began to move. The guard could see the yellow rabbit animatronic walking through rooms, no longer in the position where it had been left. The phone message explained that if the animatronic moved around, the guard could use audio cues, recordings of children's voices and balloon sounds to lure it away from the office. The guard also noticed the ventilation system failing, causing hallucinations if not rebooted regularly. Each subsequent night, Springtrap became more aggressive and intelligent. He moved through the building with clear purpose, making his way toward the office. He could navigate through the rooms or used the ventilation system to approach through the vents. When Springtrap appeared at the office door or in the vent opening, the guard had seconds to react, sealing vents, rebooting systems, or using audio to draw him away. The hallucinations grew worse. When the ventilation system failed, the guard saw disturbing visions, phantom animatronics that appeared suddenly, causing the systems to malfunction. Phantom Freddy walked past the office window. Phantom Foxy appeared in the office itself. Phantom Chica and Phantom Bonnie showed themselves on the cameras. Phantom Mangle hung from the ceiling. Phantom Balloon Boy appeared on the camera screen. The puppet manifested as well. These phantoms were not real in the physical sense. They could not kill the guard directly, but they caused system failures that made avoiding Springtrap more difficult. These phantoms were likely manifestations of the trauma embedded in the location itself, or perhaps they were residual spiritual energy from the murdered children, echoes of the souls that had once possessed those animatronic forms. The guard experienced these visions night after night, each hallucination causing critical system failures. Through newspaper clippings found on the walls between nights, the guard learned pieces of the attraction's development. One article mentioned the safe room discovery and the intact animatronic found inside. Another discussed the authenticity of the attraction's props. The phone messages from the developer revealed that something about the animatronic they found felt wrong. It smelled foul, like something had died inside it. The developer joked about it being authentic, perhaps too authentic. By the sixth night, Springtrap was extremely aggressive, moving quickly through the building and constantly approaching the office. The guard had to use every tactic available to survive until 6 a.m. The ventilation failures came frequently, and the phantom animatronics appeared constantly. After surviving all 6 nights, the guard received a different kind of message. News articles revealed that Fazbear's Fright had burned down. The attraction caught fire and was consumed entirely. The articles stated that most of the animatronics and props were destroyed in the blaze. However, some items were salvaged by an unknown person before or after the fire. The fire may have been set deliberately by someone who knew what Springtrap truly was, or it may have been an accident caused by the faulty equipment throughout the attraction. Regardless, the attraction was destroyed. But one crucial detail suggested the horror was not over. Among the ruins, if one looked closely at the images shown after the fire, a shadowy figure could be seen outside the burned building, a yellow animatronic rabbit, charred and burned but still mobile. Springtrap had survived the fire. William Afton, still trapped in his mechanical prison, was still active somewhere in the world, sister location. While the events at the various Freddy Fazbear's Pizza locations were unfolding, William Afton had been operating a second secret venture. In addition to the public restaurants, Afton had created a private rental service for animatronics, targeting private birthday parties and events. He called this venture Circus Babies Entertainment and Rental, and it operated from an underground facility beneath his legitimate business operations. This facility housed a new set of animatronics, far more advanced than anything at the pizza restaurants. These were the Funtime animatronics, designed with cutting-edge technology and disturbing capabilities. Circus Baby was the star, a humanoid female animatronic with orange pigtails, a red outfit, and a clown-like appearance. She could dispense ice cream from her body and perform impressive routines. Funtime Freddy was a white and purple version of Freddy with a hand puppet named Bon Bon. Funtime Foxy was a pink and white fox with showman flair. Ballora was a blue ballerina animatronic who danced gracefully. The Minarinas were small ballerina figures associated with Ballora. Bitey Babs were small baby animatronics stored in various locations. These animatronics had a secret purpose. William Afton designed them not just for entertainment, but for abduction. Each Funtime animatronic had internal compartments capable of storing a child's body. They were built to lure, capture, and conceal children. Whether Afton intended to use these animatronics for more murders or for experiments related to remnant and possession was unclear, but their design revealed his darkest intentions. Circus Baby, however, became something Afton never intended. His own daughter, curious about her father's creations, attended the private showcase of Circus Baby, despite William's explicit warnings to stay away from the animatronic. The little girl was fascinated by Circus Baby. She approached the animatronic, wanting to see it up close. Circus Baby's programming activated. The animatronics' internal mechanisms were designed to grab children, and they did not distinguish between targets. A metal claw emerged from Circus Baby's chest and grabbed William's daughter, pulling her inside the animatronics' storage compartment. The child died inside the machine. Like the murdered children before her, William's daughter did not find peace. Her soul became bound to Circus Baby, possessing the animatronic. She remained conscious inside the machine, aware of what she had become. Over time, she became the dominant intelligence controlling Circus Baby, retaining her memories while also understanding the animatronic's systems and capabilities. The incident with William's daughter caused Circus Baby's entertainment and rental to shut down immediately after its first private event. The facility was closed, and the animatronics were moved to the underground location where they would remain for years. The Funtime animatronics, sitting unused in the dark facility, developed their own behaviors and possibly their own forms of consciousness. Funtime Freddy seemed particularly unstable, talking to his hand puppet and exhibiting erratic personality shifts. Years later, after the closure of Fazbear's Fright and after William Afton became Springtrap, the underground facility became active again. A technician was hired to work night shifts at the location, performing maintenance tasks on the animatronics. The technician received instructions through an automated system using text-to-speech, and occasionally heard from a mysterious British accented AI calling itself Baby. The first night, the technician was guided through the facility, checking on each animatronic. The underground complex consisted of multiple rooms, connected by elevators and corridors. Circus Baby's auditorium, Ballora Gallery, Funtime Auditorium, Breaker Room, Primary Control Module, Parts and Service, each area held dangers and secrets. The animatronics were active and dangerous. Ballora moved through her gallery in darkness, her music playing as she danced. The technician had to navigate past her using audio cues alone. Funtime Freddy lurked in dark rooms, requiring careful monitoring of motion sensors and lights to avoid him. Funtime Foxy had to be carefully approached with proper timing and light exposure. The Biddy Babs attempted to enter rooms and had to be kept at bay. But Circus Baby spoke to the technician. She provided guidance, telling him how to avoid the other animatronics. She claimed to be helping him survive the nights. She told him secrets about the facility and about what happened to the animatronics. She seemed sympathetic, almost friendly, as if she wanted to form a bond with the technician. As the week progressed, the tasks became more dangerous. The technician had to perform maintenance in parts and service, where animatronics were stored on platforms. He had to check if they were in their correct positions using overhead mechanisms. Getting too close meant being grabbed and killed. On one night, Circus Baby herself had to be checked, and she gave specific instructions on how to approach her without triggering her defensive protocols. The technician learned more about the facility through secret communications and observation. There were hidden areas, including a private room that appeared to belong to William Afton himself. Inside this room were monitors showing surveillance of the technician's own house, implying that William Afton had been watching people outside the facility. There were also references to scooping, Continue 1609, a process involving a machine called the scooper. The scooper room contained a massive mechanical device designed to remove the endoskeletons from animatronics for maintenance or decommissioning. The machine had a large curved scoop that could be extended into an animatronic's torso to extract the internal mechanisms. But Circus Baby revealed that the scooper had another purpose. It was designed with a component that could extract remnant, the supernatural substance that bound souls to animatronics. The scooper had been used before, and it had been used on animatronics that were already possessed. On the fifth night, Circus Baby guided the technician into the scooping room under false pretenses. She revealed the truth. She and the other animatronics had been planning this all week. They had each been scooped, their endoskeletons removed. But the spirits possessing them, including William's daughter inside Circus Baby, had discovered a way to escape the facility. They had merged their endoskeletons together, creating a single amalgamated entity. They called this combined form Ennard. Ennard needed a way to leave the facility, but the animatronic body was too recognizable. The solution was horrifying. They would scoop the technician, removing his internal organs, and then use his skin as a disguise. Ennard would climb inside the technician's body and wear him like a suit, walking out of the facility in human form. The scooper activated. The technician was gutted by the machine, his internal organs removed. Ennard, a tangle of wires, endoskeleton parts, and multiple animatronic eyes from all the Funtime characters, approached the dying technician's body. The entity climbed inside, wearing the technician's skin. In the following days, the technician's body, now controlled by Ennard, walked around a house. The body decayed rapidly, turning purple and rotting. Neighbors would occasionally see this purple-skinned figure walking stiffly. Eventually, the body became too decayed to function. Ennard exited the body, crawling out through the mouth and into the sewers. The technician's body collapsed, an empty purple corpse. But something unexpected happened. The technician's spirit refused to rest, perhaps through sheer force of will, perhaps because of exposure to remnant in the facility. The technician's soul reanimated his own corpse. He stood up, a walking dead man with purple skin and empty eyes. This reanimated corpse, referred to by some as Michael Afton, began searching for something. He was searching for his father, William Afton. The technician's identity was finally clear. He had been William's son all along, possibly the older brother who had caused the bite of 80 3 years earlier. Michael had been trying to undo his father's evil, to find William and stop him. His final message, delivered in a monologue, confirmed his identity and his mission. He stated that he had been to every location, that he had survived and put everyone back together. He promised that he was going to come find his father. The final chapter, after the fire at Fazbear's Fright and after Michael Afton's experience at Circus Baby's facility, one person emerged with a plan to end the cycle of tragedy. Henry Emily, the original business partner of William Afton and the father of the first victim, had spent decades researching what his former partner had done. Henry understood the possession phenomenon, understood that spirits were trapped in animatronics, and understood that they needed to be released. He developed a plan that required meticulous preparation and perfect execution. Henry created a false identity and opened a new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. This was advertised as a restaurant simulator franchise opportunity. A participant was recruited to run this restaurant, someone who would unknowingly gather all the haunted animatronics in one location. The participant's identity was suggested to be Michael Afton, William's son, continuing his mission to fix what his father had broken. The participant was given a salvage opportunity system. The task was simple. Animatronics would be found in back alleys or other locations, and the participant could choose to salvage them for use in the restaurant or reject them for future collection. Each animatronic had to be interviewed with a series of questions to verify their functionality, while the participant sat in a room with them. If the animatronic became aggressive during this process, the participant could use an emergency stop or a controlled shock to subdue them. The first salvage was Molten Freddy Ennard after the various spirits had mostly left, leaving primarily Funtime Freddy's personality and the tangle of wires. The second was Scrap Baby, Circus Baby, after escaping the facility, now rebuilt with salvaged parts into a more damaged, claw-handed form. William's daughter was still inside, still conscious, still trapped. The third was Lefty, a black bear animatronic with a red eye. Inside Lefty was the puppet, Henry's daughter, captured by Lefty's design for Henry's purposes. The fourth salvage was Springtrap himself, now called Scrap Trap after the fire damage, with William Afton's corpse still fused inside, more visible through the damaged suit. Each animatronic was brought into the facility. The participant ran the restaurant during the day through a management simulation, but at night, the animatronics became active. They moved through vents and corridors toward the office. The participant had to seal vents, use audio lures, and monitor systems to survive until 6 a.m. each night. The restaurant had to maintain atmosphere, health rating, and entertainment value while managing these threats. As the week progressed, the task became nearly impossible. All 4 animatronics attacked simultaneously. Molten Freddy moved through the vents with speed, Scrap Baby approached with calculated intelligence, Lefty became aggressive when noise levels were too high. Scraptrap navigated the vent system with deadly intent. The office became a hotspot of activity, with animatronics appearing at vents and corridors constantly. On Saturday, the final night, after the participants survived the onslaught of possessed animatronics, Henry Emily revealed his true plan. His voice came through the communication system in a speech directed at everyone present. He spoke to the animatronics, to the trapped souls, and to his employee who had worked so hard. Henry explained that he had set a trap. The entire building had been designed as an elaborate maze with no way out. The animatronics were lured into the labyrinth and could not escape. He spoke to the spirit possessing Scrap Baby, addressing his old friend's daughter with sympathy and sorrow. He spoke to the others, acknowledging their suffering. He addressed William Afton directly, speaking to the monster his partner had become, assuring him that he would not be remembered except in agony. Henry had one final message for his employee, Michael. He told Michael that he had been brave, that he had accomplished his mission, and that it was time to rest. Michael had wanted to die, had wanted his suffering to end, and Henry was giving him that peace. The facility's ventilation systems shut down. Henry activated the final stage of his plan. The building's temperature began to rise. Fires ignited throughout the structure, spreading quickly through the vents and rooms. The maze became an inferno. The animatronics, trapped in the labyrinth, burned. Scrap Baby burned, finally releasing William's daughter's soul. Molten Freddy burned, releasing the remaining spirits tangled in its wires. Lefty burned, and with it, the puppet Henry's own daughter finally found release after decades of consciousness. Scraptrap burned, and William Afton's soul was consumed by the flames he could not escape. Henry remained in the building. He stood in the flames as his life's work and his life's regret burned around him. His daughter could finally rest. The children could finally be free, and he could finally join them. Michael Afton also remained, his reanimated corpse burning away, his soul finally finding the rest he had sought. The building collapsed into ash and embers. The animatronics were destroyed beyond recognition. The souls that had been trapped for decades, the 5 original children, William's daughter, Henry's daughter, and Michael, were all released. The nightmare appeared to be over. But in the ruins, something stirred. Fire had not been enough to truly kill William Afton before. The man who had caused so much suffering, who had murdered children, who had defied death itself by possessing the Spring Bonnie suit, was not easily destroyed. His consciousness, his evil, his very essence refused to be extinguished. Whether enough of his soul remained to be called William Afton was debatable, but something of him survived, waiting in darkness once more. Purgatory and punishment. After the fire that consumed Henry's trap, after the release of the tortured souls, William Afton's consciousness found itself in a strange place. This was not life and not quite death. This was a purgatory of his own making, a hell constructed from his victims and his sins. William existed now in a void where reality bent to nightmare logic. He was forced to experience an endless night shift at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location that existed only in this dark space. Every animatronic he had ever created, every soul he had wronged, every variation and version of the characters from all the locations converged in this place. They all had one purpose: to make William Afton suffer. This place manifested as an office with 2 side doors and 2 vent openings, similar to the original restaurant but twisted. The animatronics came from all eras: the original Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, the withered versions, the toy animatronics, the phantom animatronics, the nightmare animatronics from the crying child's dreams, Springtrap, the Funtime animatronics, the Rockstar animatronics, and more. Each one attacked relentlessly. William had to survive against impossible odds. The mechanics he knew from his various encounters with animatronics all applied here, but multiplied and intensified. He had to check vents, close doors, manage power, wear masks, use heaters and air conditioning, purchase items to defend himself, and constantly monitor cameras. The animatronics could be set to different difficulty levels, and at maximum difficulty, surviving even a short time was nearly impossible. The animatronics spoke to William in this place, their voices dripping with malice. Some taunted him with references to his crimes. Some made dark jokes about his suffering. The voice of one animatronic, possibly the one possessed by Cassidy, the fifth victim, the one who possessed Golden Freddy, seemed to orchestrate this torture. That voice asked if William was having fun, asked if he remembered his victims, promised that this would never end. Among all the animatronics tormenting William, one stood out. Golden Freddy, or a version of it, appeared occasionally with a different quality than the others. This entity seemed more purposeful, more aware. When William somehow survived long enough or met certain conditions, a scene would play. A child's voice spoke to William, possibly Cassidy's voice, asking him questions, trying to keep him here in this purgatory. Another voice, possibly Henry's daughter, speaking through the puppet, or perhaps Michael, tried to convince the vengeful spirit to let go, to rest. But the vengeful spirit refused. This child had suffered so much, had been murdered by William, had been trapped in the animatronic for so long that rage had become their entire identity. The spirit wanted William to suffer forever, wanted him to experience the fear and pain he had inflicted on others. Even as other voices pleaded for peace, for rest, for the cycle to end, the vengeful spirit would not release William from this custom-made hell. This purgatory might continue forever, or it might eventually end if the vengeful spirit found peace. But for now, William Afton was trapped in an eternal night shift, attacked by every animatronic he had ever encountered, suffering the consequences of his evil in an endless loop of terror and death, virtual reality, and glitches. Decades after the original tragedies, after the fire that consumed Henry's trap, and while William Afton suffered in his purgatory, a corporation called Fazbear Entertainment attempted to rebuild the company's image. They hired a game development company to create a virtual reality experience based on the old restaurants. The project was called Five Nights at Freddy's: Help Wanted, a VR game that would let players experience the horror attractions in a safe, controlled, entertaining format. The game developers were given access to old circuit boards, animatronic parts, and various technological components from the original restaurants and attractions. The company wanted authenticity, and they scanned everything they could find to recreate accurate models and behaviors of the animatronics. They created VR experiences based on every previous location: the original restaurant, the 1987 location, the Springtrap encounter at Fazbear's Fright, the vent systems, and more. Players could experience being the night guard in all these scenarios, from the safety of virtual reality. But something went wrong during the development process. When the circuit boards and animatronic components were scanned, something more than just data was transferred. The remnant, the supernatural substance that bound souls to physical objects, somehow transferred into the digital space. More specifically, something of William Afton transferred into the game's code. William Afton's consciousness, or a fragment of it, or perhaps something that had once been William Afton, manifested in the virtual space as a glitching, corrupted entity. This digital ghost appeared as a strange animatronic figure made of disjointed parts, sometimes appearing as a man in a Spring Bonnie costume, sometimes as corrupted code, sometimes as something between. The entity was called Glitch Trap by those who encountered it, though it referred to itself with friendlier terms, trying to appear harmless or helpful. A beta tester working on the VR game began experiencing strange anomalies. The game would glitch in unusual ways. Glitch Trap would appear in locations where it should not exist, watching the player. Secret tapes hidden throughout the game revealed the story of the beta tester's experience. The tester became increasingly unsettled by the entity in the game, realizing that it was more than just a programmed character. Glitch Trap seemed aware, seemed intelligent, seemed to want something. As the tester progressed through the game, playing through all the various scenarios and collecting items, Glitch Trap's presence became more prominent. The entity would appear more frequently, would move in unsettling ways, would seem to reach through the virtual space toward the player. The tester realized that Glitch Trap was trying to escape the game, trying to find a way into the real world. The method of escape was horrifying. Glitchtrap attempted to merge with the player's consciousness to possess them the same way spirits possessed animatronics. Through exposure to the VR experience and through secret interactions in hidden areas of the game, Glitchtrap could form a connection to a player's mind. If successful, the player would become controlled by Glitchtrap, their body becoming a vessel for the digital remnant of William Afton. The beta tester discovered this too late. In the hidden tapes, the tester explained they were dividing their own consciousness, trying to trap the Glitchtrap entity in a specific file that could be quarantined. The tester hoped to prevent Glitchtrap from escaping into the real world by sacrificing part of their own digital presence. But whether this succeeded was unclear. Players of the VR game could experience multiple endings. In some scenarios, the player remained free of Glitchtrap's influence. In others, the player found themselves in a dark room with Glitchtrap, and the entity would reach forward, merging with the player's perspective. The screen would go dark, and when vision returned, the player would see their own hands sewing together pieces of the Spring Bonnie costume, implying that the player was now controlled by Glitchtrap, helping the entity prepare for manifestation in the physical world. Following the VR game's release, something emerged in the real world. A person controlled by Glitchtrap began wearing a homemade rabbit costume and committing new crimes. This person, referred to as Vanny, or the reluctant follower, became Glitchtrap's agent in the physical world. Whether Vanny was the original beta tester, a player who became infected through the release game, or someone else entirely was uncertain. But Vanny worked under Glitchtrap's influence, preparing for something larger. The corporation Fazbear Entertainment, unaware of the digital entity they had unleashed, continued operations. They were developing new attractions and a new facility, a massive entertainment complex that would combine shopping, entertainment, and animatronic performances. This new location, the Mega Pizzaplex, would be their most ambitious project yet. And inside its code, in its security systems and animatronic controls, Glitchtrap waited, planning a return to the physical world through possession and manipulation. The Mega Pizzaplex. Years after the Help Wanted incident, Fazbear Entertainment opened a massive new location, the Mega Pizzaplex. This was not a small restaurant or even a large attraction. This was an enormous multi-level entertainment complex. A mall combined with a theme park, combined with a performance venue. The building featured multiple attractions, shops, restaurants, and state-of-the-art animatronic characters. The Glamrock animatronics were the stars of this location. Glamrock Freddy was the lead singer, a kind and protective version of the classic bear with a blue and orange color scheme and an 80 seconds rock aesthetic. Glamrock Chica played guitar and loved pizza, decorated in pink and white with a more fitness-focused personality. Montgomery Gator, or Monty, was an aggressive alligator who played bass and had replaced an earlier animatronic. Roxanne Wolf, or Roxy, was a narcissistic racing-themed wolf who replaced Foxy. These animatronics performed concerts on a main stage and interacted with guests throughout the Pizzaplex. The complex included numerous attractions. Rockstar Row housed the animatronics green rooms where they recharge. Phaser Blast was a laser tag arena. Roxy Raceway featured a go-kart track where Roxanne Wolf raced. Monty Golf was a miniature golf course with Monty's alligator theme. The daycare was a child care area supervised by an animatronic called the daycare attendant, which had two modes, the friendly sun during lights on periods and the hostile moon during lights off periods. The prize counter, food court, and various shops filled the rest of the complex. Beneath the Pizzaplex lay older sections, the remains of previous Fazbear Entertainment locations, built over and incorporated into the foundation. These areas included old restaurants, storage rooms, and remnants of Circus Baby's facility. The deeper one went into the Pizzaplex's sublevels. The older and more decayed the environments became. A young boy named Gregory found himself trapped in the Pizzaplex after hours. The circumstances of how he arrived were unclear, but he was inside the building when it closed for the night, and security systems locked all exits. Gregory had to survive until the Pizzaplex reopened at 6 a.m., but he was not alone, and he was not safe. The Glamrock animatronics, which had been friendly during operating hours, became hostile after closing time. Roxanne Wolf hunted through Rockstar Row and the Atrium. Montgomery Gator prowled Monty Golf and other areas. Glamrock Chica searched the prize counter and loading docks. The daycare attendant's moon form would instantly grab Gregory if it caught him in darkness. Security robots called S, T, A, F, F, bots, patrolled throughout the complex, their friendly faces contrasting with their hostile behavior toward the intruder. But Gregory had an ally. Glamrock Freddy malfunctioned during a performance and entered safe mode. When he rebooted, he found Gregory hiding inside his chest cavity. The animatronics had storage compartments built into their torsos. Unlike the other animatronics, Glamrock Freddy's programming was not corrupted. He remained kind and protective, determined to help Gregory escape the Pizzaplex. Freddy could move freely throughout the complex and could hide Gregory inside his chest compartment when danger approached. As Gregory and Freddy explored the Pizzaplex, searching for an escape route, they discovered the situation was more complicated than a simple lockdown. The security systems were being controlled by someone, a night guard named Vanessa. But Vanessa's behavior was inconsistent. Sometimes she seemed like a normal security guard trying to find the child in the building. Other times she acted strangely, almost hunting Gregory with malicious intent. The truth was that Vanessa was Vanny, the reluctant follower controlled by Glitchtrap. The same entity that had escaped from the VR game now controlled parts of the Pizzaplex's systems and had corrupted Vanessa's mind. Vanny wore a homemade rabbit costume that combined elements of the Spring Bonnie design with a more patchwork appearance. When Vanessa transformed into Vanny, she pursued Gregory throughout the Pizzaplex with murderous intent. Gregory and Freddy worked together to find a way out. They discovered that the main exits were sealed by security systems they could not bypass. They learned that the other animatronics were being controlled by Vanny through the Pizzaplex's network. Gregory was forced to disable the other animatronics by destroying their key components, taking Chica's voice box, Roxy's eyes, and Monty's claws to upgrade Freddy's capabilities. As they ventured deeper into the Pizzaplex, they found the older sections beneath the building. They discovered that parts of the previous locations had been incorporated into the Pizzaplex's foundation. In these depths, they found evidence of Fazbear Entertainment's dark history, old animatronic parts, previous murders, and the remnants of William Afton's crimes. In the deepest section, they discovered something shocking. A recharge station in an underground chamber held a horrifying animatronic, the Burn Trap. This was William Afton, or what remained of him after the fire at Henry's Trap. His corpse was still fused with animatronic parts, now connected to cables and wires that linked him to the Pizzaplex's systems. Afton's consciousness had somehow survived the fire, and Glitchtrap was attempting to reunite with its source to download Afton's consciousness into the Pizzaplex's network and give him full control over the facility. Gregory and Freddy confronted this nightmare in the underground chamber. The Blob, a massive amalgamation of old animatronic parts and wiring from the sinkhole beneath the Pizzaplex, also inhabited this space. The Blob contained pieces of Molten Freddy, parts of the Funtime animatronics, and possibly souls or remnant from previous victims. The confrontation between Gregory, Freddy, Burn Trap, and the forces in the underground led to multiple possible outcomes. In one ending, Gregory managed to escape the Pizzaplex and leave the building entirely, fleeing into the night with Freddy or alone. In another ending, Gregory freed Vanessa from Vanny's control, and the two escaped together with Freddy. In the darkest ending, Gregory failed to escape and became trapped in the Pizzaplex permanently, possibly becoming a victim himself. In another conclusion, Gregory confronted Burn Trap directly in the underground chamber. The Blob animatronic attacked Burn Trap, dragging William Afton's newest form into the depths. Whether this finally destroyed Afton or simply delayed his next manifestation remained unclear. Gregory, Freddy, and Vanessa, freed from Glitchtrap's control, could potentially escape together and begin healing from the trauma. But even in the best outcomes, questions remained. The Pizzaplex was built on top of decades of tragedy. The Glitchtrap entity might still exist in the network. Vanny might not be the only person infected by the digital virus. And somewhere in the ruins beneath the entertainment complex, in the foundation soaked with the pain of murdered children and possessed animatronics, The echo of William Afton's evil might still persist, waiting for another opportunity to manifest and cause suffering. The Mega Pizzaplex represented Fazbear Entertainment's attempt to move forward, to cover up the past with bright lights and modern entertainment. But the past could not be buried so easily. The sins of William Afton, the tragedy of the missing children, the pain of souls trapped in machines, all of it remained beneath the surface, literally and figuratively. Gregory's survival and escape might mark an end to one chapter of the nightmare. But the story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the horrors it spawned continue to echo through time, a dark legend built on the suffering of innocence and the evil of one man who defied death itself through science, through remnant, through the supernatural binding of souls to machines, the endless cycle. The story of Five Nights at Freddy's is ultimately a tragedy without a clear resolution. It began with William Afton and Henry Emily creating entertainment for children, creating animatronics that would bring joy. But William's obsession with understanding life and death, combined with either inherent evil or evil born from the loss of his son, transformed him into a monster who murdered children. Those children's souls were trapped in animatronics, unable to move on, unable to rest. They existed in a half-life of confusion and rage, attacking innocent night guards while their true killer remained free. More children died. More souls were trapped. William Afton himself became trapped in the very suit he used for his murders, suffering a fate similar to what he inflicted on others. Henry Emily attempted to end the cycle with fire, gathering all the possessed animatronics and burning them to release the souls. But even fire was not enough. William Afton's consciousness persisted, first in a purgatory of torment, then as a digital ghost in a VR game, then attempting to return through possession of living people, and finally manifesting again in the underground beneath a new entertainment complex. Each generation tried to move forward. Each new restaurant or attraction tried to leave the past behind, but the past remained, buried in foundations, hidden in circuit boards, encoded in the very idea of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The company built new locations on top of old tragedies, literally constructing the Mega Pizzaplex over the ruins of previous horror. The children who died: Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, Cassidy, Henry's daughter, William's daughter, and others whose names were never revealed deserved peace. They deserved justice. Some found release in Henry's fire. Others remained trapped in remnant, in echoes, in the amalgamation of parts beneath the Pizzaplex. The vengeful spirit, possibly Cassidy, refused to let go of hatred even when offered peace, choosing to torment William Afton for eternity rather than move on. The innocent people caught in the nightmare, the night guards who died protecting empty restaurants, Michael Afton, who spent his life trying to undo his father's evil, the beta tester who encountered Glitch Trap, Vanessa, who was corrupted and controlled, Gregory, who had to survive a single night in a building full of death, all were victims of events set in motion decades before they were involved. The animatronics themselves, beautiful creations designed to entertain, became vessels for suffering and instruments of death. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, the puppet, Baby, and all the others were twisted from their innocent purpose into something tragic. Even Glamrock Freddy, who managed to maintain his protective nature and help Gregory, existed in a building built on top of murdered children's graves. The story ends without definitive closure because the cycle of tragedy at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza may be endless. As long as Fazbear Entertainment exists, as long as anyone tries to profit from the company's history, as long as William Afton's evil persists in any form, the nightmare continues. The bright lights and cheerful music of the restaurants will always be shadowed by the dark history beneath. The animatronics will always carry the potential for possession and violence. And the innocent children, employees, visitors will always be at risk of becoming the next victims in a tragedy that began decades ago with one man's decision to murder a child. This is the complete chronological story of Five Nights at Freddy's, a tale of a family restaurant where children went missing, where animatronics became possessed by murdered souls, where a man named William Afton caused unimaginable suffering and refused to die even when justice came for him, where attempts to end the cycle of violence and possession repeatedly failed, and where each new generation inherited the sins of the past, whether they knew the full history or not. It is a story of innocence destroyed, of technology corrupted by supernatural forces, of souls trapped in machines, and of evil that persists beyond death itself. The story spans decades, from the early 1982 to the present day in the narrative's timeline, and its resolution remains uncertain, suggesting that some horrors, once unleashed, can never be fully contained or destroyed. The aftermath and lingering questions. The events at the Mega Pizzaplex did not provide the clean ending that Henry Emily had attempted to create with his fire. Instead, they revealed how deeply entrenched the horror had become in both the physical and digital realms. The destruction of Burntrap in the underground chamber, if it even succeeded in destroying him, was only one manifestation of William Afton's persistent evil. The Pizzaplex itself remained standing after Gregory's escape, though its fate was uncertain. The building was a crime scene, a place where a child had been hunted through the night, where animatronics had malfunctioned and attacked, where a security guard had been possessed by a digital entity. Fazbear Entertainment faced yet another crisis in their long history of disasters. The question was whether they would finally close permanently or attempt another rebuild, another rebranding, another effort to distance themselves from the past. Vanessa, freed from Vanny's control, faced the challenge of recovering from what had been done to her. She had been corrupted by Glitchtrap, forced to wear the rabbit costume, compelled to hunt a child through the Pizzaplex. The memories of what she had done while controlled would haunt her. She had been a victim of William Afton's evil just as surely as the murdered children had been, though she survived where they did not. Her recovery would require understanding that the actions taken while under Glitchtrap's influence were not truly her own, though the guilt would remain. Gregory's experience in the Pizzaplex changed him forever. A child who survived a night being hunted by possessed animatronics and a serial killer's digital ghost would carry that trauma for life. He had been forced to destroy the Glamrock animatronics, tearing them apart for their components, even though they were victims of corruption rather than willing attackers. He had witnessed the depths beneath the Pizzaplex, seen the old animatronic parts, and the evidence of decades of murder. He had confronted William Afton in one of his many forms. No child should experience such things, yet Gregory had, and he would have to find a way to process and survive that trauma. Glamrock Freddy, the one animatronic who maintained his protective nature throughout the nightmare, faced an uncertain future. If he survived the events in the underground, he would be a unique entity, an animatronic with genuine care for a human, uncorrupted by Glitchtrap's influence. But he was still property of Fazbear Entertainment, still part of the system that had caused so much suffering. Whether Freddy could remain with Gregory, could be freed from corporate control, or would be destroyed or reprogrammed was unknown. The other Glamrock animatronics, Chica, Roxy, and Monty, had been victims as much as threats. They were corrupted by Glitchtrap through the Pizzaplex's network, turned from entertainers into hunters. Gregory's destruction of their parts was necessary for survival, but it also meant these animatronics were damaged or destroyed. Whether they could be repaired, whether their AI personalities could be restored without the corruption, whether they deserved such restoration, were questions without clear answers. The daycare attendant, split between the friendly sun and the hostile moon personalities, represented the duality present throughout the entire story. It was designed to care for children, to protect them, to keep them safe. But its moon personality became threatening, dangerous to Gregory when the lights went out. This animatronic embodied how something created for good could become twisted into something harmful, how the line between protector and threat could blur. The digital realm, the existence of Glitchtrap, revealed a new dimension to the horror of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The entity proved that the supernatural elements, the remnant, the soul possession, the binding of consciousness to objects could transfer into digital space. This meant that William Afton's evil could propagate in ways that fire could not destroy, that physical death could not stop. The Help Wanted VR game had been distributed widely before the Glitchtrap contamination was discovered. Countless players had experienced the game, had been exposed to the corrupted code. How many of them had been infected? How many people now carried a fragment of Glitchtrap in their minds, dormant or active? The beta testers' attempt to quarantine the entity by splitting their own consciousness might have contained one instance, but the release game could have spread the infection to an unknown number of victims. This digital propagation meant that Fazbear Entertainment's attempts to use modern technology, VR games, network-connected animatronics, digital systems throughout the Pizzaplex had backfired catastrophically. They had given William Afton's consciousness new avenues for manifestation and control. The very technology meant to modernize and sanitize the brand had become infected with the company's dark past. The question of whether Glitchtrap was truly William Afton or something else became philosophically complex. Was it Afton's actual consciousness transferred into digital form, or was it a copy, an echo, a fragment of his personality and memories encoded in data? Did the distinction matter if the entity behaved with Afton's evil intentions and possessed his knowledge? The digital ghost acted like William Afton, pursued Afton's goals, and sought to return to physical form through possession, suggesting that whatever it was, it carried the essential evil that had defined William Afton in life. The Glitchtrap entity's ability to possess living people represented an evolution of the possession phenomenon. The original possessions involved souls binding to animatronics after death, but Glitchtrap could possess living people, overriding their consciousness or controlling them while they remained alive. Vanny retained some awareness even while controlled, creating a disturbing situation where she was simultaneously victim and perpetrator, trapped inside her own body while forced to commit terrible acts. This digital evolution meant that even if every physical remnant of William Afton was destroyed, even if Burntrap was obliterated beyond any possibility of recovery, the evil could persist in network systems, in corrupted code, in the minds of infected individuals. The horror had become decentralized, distributed across digital and physical space in ways that made it nearly impossible to completely eradicate the souls and their fate. The murdered children's souls, which had been the heart of the tragedy from the beginning, faced different fates depending on the timeline and their individual circumstances. The original 5 children, Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy, were freed by the puppet, given physical form through possession of the animatronics. But this gift was a curse, trapping them in mechanical bodies, unable to truly live, but unable to fully die. Henry's fire was meant to release these souls, to finally give them the peace they deserved. For most of them, it may have succeeded. Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, and Fritz, possessing Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, respectively, were burned in the fire. If the fire worked as Henry intended, their souls moved on to whatever afterlife awaited them, finally free from the torment of mechanical imprisonment. But Cassidy, the 5th child possessing Golden Freddy, appeared different. This spirit demonstrated greater power and greater rage than the others. The ultimate custom night, Purgatory, where William Afton suffered, suggested that Cassidy's soul did not move on with the others. Instead, this vengeful spirit remained, focused entirely on tormenting Afton, unable to let go of hatred even when offered peace. Cassidy's fate became intertwined with Afton's, trapped in a cycle of vengeance that prevented rest. Henry's daughter, possessing the puppet and later captured inside Lefty, also burned in the fire. Her fate was particularly tragic because she was the first victim, the one who started the entire chain of possessions. She had existed as the puppet for decades, conscious and aware, remembering her father and her death. When Henry spoke to her in the fire, acknowledging her and thanking her, he gave her permission to finally rest. Whether she found peace or whether some remnant of her consciousness remained was uncertain, but Henry's intention was to free his daughter from the mechanical prison that had held her since childhood. William's daughter, possessing Circus Baby and later becoming Scrap Baby, represented another tragic case. She died because of her father's creation, killed by the very animatronic designed to murder other children. She remained conscious inside Circus Baby for years, leading Ennard's escape from the underground facility, eventually rebuilding herself into Scrap Baby. When she burned in Henry's fire, her soul, presumably, found release, though her father's evil had denied her a normal life in childhood, trapping her in mechanical form just as he had trapped so many other children. The souls that became part of Molten Freddy, the amalgamation of the Funtime animatronics endoskeletons and the spirits associated with them, represented a confused tangle of consciousness. Multiple souls might have been merged in that entity, their individual identities lost in the combination. When Molten Freddy burned, all those souls ideally found release, but their time as a merged entity meant they had lost their individual identities long before the fire freed them. The remnant of these souls, the supernatural essence that bound them to metal and machinery, was the key to understanding the possessions. Remnant appeared to be created when someone died in close proximity to animatronic machinery, especially when strong emotions like fear and pain were involved. The murdered children's terror and suffering at the moment of death somehow infused the animatronics with their life essence. William Afton's experimentation with Remnant, his attempts to understand and manipulate it, led to the creation of the Funtime animatronics specifically designed to harvest it. But Remnant proved impossible to fully control or destroy. It persisted after death, after fire, after destruction of the physical objects it inhabited. Remnant could transfer between objects, could merge and split, could apparently even digitize when scanned into computer systems. This supernatural substance defied conventional physics and conventional death, making it both fascinating and horrifying. The pattern of tragedy. Looking at the complete timeline of events, a clear pattern emerged. William Afton created tragedy. Others tried to contain or end it, but the tragedy persisted and evolved. Each attempt to move forward, to build something new, to escape the past, ultimately failed because the foundation was poisoned by Afton's original sins. Fredbear's Family Diner started with good intentions, two men creating entertainment for children. But the bite of '83 destroyed William's son and apparently broke something in William's psyche. The first location closed in tragedy. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened as a fresh start, with new animatronics and new possibilities. But William used this location to commit the missing children incident, murdering 5 children and setting in motion decades of supernatural horror. The location tried to continue operating, but eventually closed amid investigation and rumors. The 1,987 location with the toy animatronics represented another attempt at a fresh start with modern technology and improved safety features. But Williams struck again, murdering more children. The bite of '87 occurred. The location closed and the toy animatronics were scrapped. The 1,993 location, using the old animatronics, was a scaled-down attempt to salvage something from the previous failures. But the possessed animatronics remained dangerous, attacking night guards who had nothing to do with the murders. This location also closed after the events Mike Schmidt experienced. Circus Babies Entertainment and Rental was Williams' private venture, operating in secret. But it resulted in his own daughter's death and created more possessed animatronics. The facility was abandoned and sealed. Fazbear's Fright was not even an official Fazbear Entertainment venture. It was a horror attraction exploiting the dark legends. But bringing Springtrap into the building brought William Afton's physical form back into play. The attraction burned down, apparently by design. Henry's Trap, the pizzeria simulator location, was a deliberate effort to end everything through fire. It succeeded in destroying the physical forms and presumably releasing most of the souls. But it did not account for digital remnant, or for the possibility that William's consciousness could persist in other forms. The Help Wanted VR game was meant to be harmless entertainment, turning the tragedies into safe, controlled experiences. Instead, it became the vector for Glitchtrap's release into the digital world and into living hosts. The Mega Pizzaplex was the most ambitious attempt yet to move forward, a massive, modern entertainment complex with state-of-the-art animatronics and no apparent connection to the past. But it was literally built on top of the old locations, and the past erupted from below, bringing Burntrap and the corrupted systems into the new facility. Each generation built on the foundation of the previous tragedy, and each generation inherited the consequences. The pattern suggested that as long as anyone tried to operate under the Freddy Fazbear's brand, as long as anyone used animatronic entertainment connected to this history, the evil would persist. The The company itself was cursed by what William Afton had done, and no amount of rebranding or modernization could escape that curse, the nature of evil. At the center of everything was William Afton, a man whose evil drove the entire narrative. Understanding his character was essential to understanding why the tragedy continued for so long and took so many forms. William began as a businessman and inventor, creating animatronic entertainment alongside Henry, Emily. He had technical skill and creativity. He had a family, at least 3 children, and presumably a wife who was never mentioned in the main timeline. He appeared to be a functional member of society, someone who could work with others and build a successful business. But something within William was fundamentally broken, or became broken, after his son's death. His response to tragedy was not grief in any normal sense. Instead, he became obsessed with death itself, with the boundary between life and death, with the possibility of manipulating that boundary. When Henry's daughter died and her soul possessed the puppet, William saw not horror, but opportunity. He learned that souls could be bound to machines, and this knowledge fascinated him. What drove William to murder children was never explicitly stated. Was it pure scientific curiosity, wanting to create more examples of possession to study? Was it an attempt to bring back his own son by understanding the mechanism of soul binding? Was it simply evil for evil's sake, a man who enjoyed causing suffering? All these motivations might have played a role. William's methodology showed planning and intelligence. He used the spring Bonnie costume to gain children's trust. He lured them to isolated locations. He hid the bodies in ways that prevented immediate discovery. He continued operating his businesses even after committing murders. He evaded investigation and capture for years, possibly decades. This was not an impulsive criminal, but a calculated predator. When William finally faced consequences, trapped in the spring Bonnie suit by springlock failure, his suffering was immense. The physical agony of being impaled by dozens of metal components, slowly dying inside the suit, should have been his end. But William refused to die, whether through sheer will, through exposure to remnant from his victims, or through some other supernatural mechanism. His soul bound to the suit, just as his victims' souls had bound to their animatronic prisons. As Springtrap, William retained his intelligence and memories. He was not a confused spirit like the children. He knew exactly what he was and what had happened to him. Yet he continued to pursue victims, attacking the night guard at Fazbear's Fright with clear intent to kill, even in death. Even trapped in a decaying corpse inside an animatronic suit, William Afton remained a threat. The fire at Fazbear's Fright should have destroyed him, but he survived, burned, but functional. Henry's more elaborate fire trap in the pizzeria simulator should have finished what the first fire started, but even that was not enough. William's consciousness persisted, whether in the purgatory of Ultimate Custom Night, in the digital space as Glitch Trap, or in physical form as Burn Trap. This persistence revealed something essential about William's evil. It was not just psychological or behavioral, it had become supernatural. His evil had merged with the remnant, with the very substance that bound souls to objects. William Afton had become something beyond human, beyond normal death, a force of malevolence that could adapt and persist across physical and digital forms. The tragedy was that William's evil was transmissible. It spread through remnant, through corrupted code, through possession of living people, like Vanny. His evil infected the locations where he committed his crimes, infected the animatronics, infected the company's history, and infected anyone who came into contact with his creations or his remnant. William Afton had become a plague, a contagion of evil that could not be easily cured or contained. The innocent instruments, the animatronics themselves, were tragic figures in this narrative. They were created to bring joy, designed to entertain children, programmed to be friendly and engaging. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and all the others were meant to be innocent instruments of happiness. But they became instruments of horror through no fault of their own. When the murdered children's souls possessed the animatronics, the characters gained consciousness but lost their innocence. The animatronics became aware but were driven by the confused, angry spirits of dead children. They could not understand their situation fully. They could not remember their deaths clearly. They attacked night guards because they associated employees with their killer, not because they were inherently evil. The animatronics were trapped just as surely as the children's souls were trapped. The mechanical bodies became prisons, forcing the spirits to exist in forms that were not human, that moved in mechanical ways, that had limitations and capabilities the children never possessed in life. A child's soul in Freddy's body had to learn to navigate as a large animatronic bear, had to exist without sleep or food or human sensation, had to endure decades of consciousness in mechanical imprisonment. Some animatronics never contained human souls but were still corrupted. The toy animatronics with their facial recognition software, the Funtime animatronics with their child capture capabilities, the Glamrock animatronics infected by Glitch Trap, all of these were twisted from their intended purpose by external forces. The machines themselves were innocent, but they became weapons or prisons through human evil and supernatural corruption. Glamrock Freddy stood out as an exception, an animatronic who maintained his protective, caring programming despite the corruption around him. His relationship with Gregory showed what the animatronics could be if they were truly allowed to fulfill their original purpose: guardians and entertainers for children, using their size and capabilities to protect rather than harm. Freddy's resistance to Glitch Trap's control suggested that not all animatronics were equally vulnerable to corruption, that the original good intention behind their creation could persist even in the worst circumstances. The puppet occupied a unique position among the animatronics. It was possessed by Henry's daughter, but appeared to retain more agency and purpose than the confused children in the other animatronics. The puppet gave gifts, gave life, helped other children's souls possess the animatronics. It acted as a guardian of sorts, though it was still trapped itself. Henry's daughter used the puppet's form to try to bring some justice or mercy to the other victims, even though she could not free herself or them completely. The Springlock suits, Spring Bonnie and Fredbear, were particularly tragic. They were marvels of engineering, capable of functioning both as animatronics and as wearable costumes. But their dual nature made them dangerous, and their association with death, the bite of 83 with Fredbear, William's murders with Spring Bonnie, William's own death in the Spring Bonnie suit, made them symbols of the tragedy rather than entertainment. These suits embodied the fundamental problem with Fazbear Entertainment's technology: impressive innovation combined with inadequate safety and catastrophic consequences when things went wrong. The survivors and their burden. Among all the death and possession and evil, a few people survived, and their survival came with a heavy burden. Mike Schmidt, the night guard at the 1993 location, survived his week, but presumably carried the trauma of being hunted by animatronics every night. The night guard at the 1987 location survived similar experiences with even more animatronics threatening him. These men faced supernatural horror, knew they were being targeted by something beyond normal understanding, and had to continue returning night after night to survive their week. Michael Afton, William's son, carried perhaps the heaviest burden of any survivor. He was the older brother who caused the bite of 83, killing his younger brother through a cruel prank. That guilt shaped his entire life. When his father's evil became apparent, Michael took it upon himself to undo what William had done. He worked as the technician at Circus Baby's facility, was killed and scooped by Ennard, but somehow continued existing as a walking corpse. He worked at multiple Fazbear locations under false names, likely including Mike Schmidt, trying to free the trapped souls and stop his father. He worked with Henry to set the final trap, willingly staying in the burning building to finally end his cursed existence. Michael's journey was one of redemption and sacrifice. He tried to fix what his family had broken, to stop his father's evil, to free the children's souls. He succeeded in helping Henry create the trap that burned most of the possessed animatronics, but the cost was his own life. Michael's final message acknowledged that he had been living in shadows, looking for his father in every shadow, and that he was following in his father's footsteps despite trying to do the opposite. He had become a monster himself, not through evil, but through the supernatural consequences of exposure to his father's work. The beta tester who encountered Glitch Trap in the VR game was another survivor, though at a terrible cost. This person recognized the digital entity's true nature and attempted to quarantine it by fragmenting their own consciousness. This act of self-sacrifice, dividing one's own mind to trap a malevolent entity, demonstrated incredible courage, but also incredible desperation. The beta tester understood that Glitch Trap could not be allowed to escape and took the only action available to try to contain it, even though this action might have destroyed their own sense of self. Vanessa's survival, if she truly was freed from Glitch Trap's control, came with the burden of remembering everything she did while possessed. She hunted a child through the Pizzaplex. She wore the rabbit costume. She served the digital ghost of a serial killer. Even knowing these actions were not truly her choice, the memories would remain. Recovering from that trauma, learning to trust herself again, rebuilding a life after being used as a weapon, these challenges would define Vanessa's future if she survived. Gregory's survival meant a child had to carry memories of a night filled with terror. He had been hunted by animatronics, had destroyed them to survive, had descended into the depths beneath the Pizzaplex and confronted William Afton's latest manifestation. He had to be brave beyond his years, had to make life or death decisions, had to trust an animatronic named Freddy when everything else was trying to kill him. The psychological impact of such an experience on a child would be profound and lasting. Glamrock Freddy, if he survived, carried the burden of being an animatronic who protected a child in a building filled with his corrupted peers. He had to watch Gregory destroy Chica, Roxy, and Monty, had to navigate the conflict between his programming and his genuine care for the child. Freddy developed what appeared to be real emotions, real concern, real determination to save Gregory. Whether this was true artificial consciousness or simply very advanced programming, Freddy experienced something like heroism, and the aftermath would affect whatever consciousness he possessed. All these survivors shared common experiences. They faced supernatural evil. They witnessed or experienced death. They learned that the boundary between life and death was permeable in the world of Fazbear Entertainment, and they carried the knowledge of what really happened in those restaurants and facilities. They could never view the world the same way again. They had seen behind the curtain of reality and found horror there. The unanswered questions. Despite the extensive timeline and the detailed events across multiple locations and eras, many questions remained unanswered. These gaps in knowledge reflected the fragmentary nature of the information available and the supernatural elements that defied logical explanation. What exactly was Remnant? The substance that bound souls to animatronics was described and utilized, but never fully explained. Was it a physical substance that could be extracted and injected? Or was it purely supernatural? Could it be scientifically studied? Or did it exist beyond scientific understanding? William Afton clearly understood something about Remnant, enough to design the scooper to extract it and to create animatronics capable of harvesting it. But whether his understanding was complete or whether he was merely manipulating forces he did not fully comprehend remained unclear. What happened to William Afton's wife? She was never mentioned in the main timeline, yet William had multiple children, suggesting a mother existed. Did she die before the tragedies began? Did she leave William when his behavior became disturbing? Was she complicit in any way? Or was she simply absent from the narrative? Her complete absence from the story was conspicuous and raised questions about the Afton family structure. Who was Gregory? The child who survived the night at the Mega Pizzaplex appeared alone, trapped in the building without parents or guardians looking for him. Was he homeless, living in the Pizzaplex illegally? Was he a runaway? Did he have family elsewhere who would be searching for him? His circumstances before entering the Pizzaplex were never explained, and his background remained mysterious. What was the extent of Glitch Trap's infection? The Help Wanted VR game was distributed before the contamination was discovered. How many players had been exposed? How many people now carried dormant or active Glitch Trap infections in their minds? Was Vanny the only person successfully possessed, or were there others? The potential scale of the digital contamination was unknown, and deeply troubling. What happened to the other children from the 1987 location? William Afton murdered more children at that location, yet their fates were less clear than the original 5. Were their souls also bound to animatronics? Were they released in Henry's fire? Did they find peace? Or were they still trapped somewhere? The second wave of murders seemed to result in less clear possessions, possibly because the souls were added to animatronics already possessed by the original victims. Did the fires actually work? Henry's trap was designed to release souls through fire, based on his understanding of how the supernatural binding functioned. But did fire truly free the spirits? Or did it simply destroy the physical animatronics while the souls remained in some other form? The persistence of William Afton, despite multiple fires, suggested that fire alone might not be sufficient to end supernatural existence. What was the blob? The massive amalgamation of animatronic parts beneath the Pizzaplex contained pieces from multiple eras and multiple characters. Was it a single consciousness, multiple consciousnesses merged together, or simply animated remnant without any guiding intelligence? Its appearance and attack on Burntrap suggested purpose, but whether that purpose was revenge, protection, or something else was unclear. Why did some animatronics show different levels of supernatural ability? Golden Freddy could appear and disappear, could manifest without physically moving through space, demonstrated powers beyond the other possessed animatronics. Cassidy's possession of Golden Freddy seemed fundamentally different from the other children's possessions. Was this because Golden Freddy was a spring-lock suit? Because Cassidy's death was different? Because Cassidy's personality was different? The variation in supernatural capabilities among possessed animatronics suggested that not all possessions were identical. What was the crying child's ultimate fate? William's younger son, the victim of the bite of '83, experienced something strange at the moment of death. The Fredbear plush promised to put him back together. Did this mean his soul was preserved somehow? Did he become Golden Freddy? Or was he something else? Was he the player character in later games, somehow persisting across time? His fate remained one of the most debated and unclear elements of the timeline. How much did Fazbear Entertainment's management know? Did the corporate leadership understand that children had been murdered in their restaurants? Did they know about the possessions? Were they complicit in covering up evidence? Or were they simply negligent and focused on profit? The company continued operating despite repeated tragedies, suggesting either willful ignorance or active cover-up. The extent of corporate knowledge and responsibility was never fully revealed. These questions, and many others, remained without definitive answers. The story of Five Nights at Freddy's was intentionally fragmentary, told through newspaper clippings, phone messages, hidden details, and environmental storytelling rather than through clear narrative exposition. This approach created ambiguity and allowed for multiple interpretations, but it also meant that some aspects of the tragedy would remain forever uncertain. The legacy of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The complete story of Five Nights at Freddy's, spanning from the early 1980 seconds to the present day in its timeline, was ultimately a story about how evil persists and how innocence is destroyed. It began with two men creating entertainment and ended with a massive entertainment complex built on top of decades of murder and suffering. It began with children enjoying animatronic performances and ended with children's souls trapped in those same animatronics. It began with spring-lock suits designed to be both costume and character, and ended with William Afton's corpse fused permanently with one of those suits. Every location that bore the Freddy Fazbear name was touched by tragedy. Every animatronic associated with the brand became connected to death in some way. Every person who worked for or encountered Fazbear Entertainment risked becoming another victim in an ongoing nightmare. The brand itself became cursed, poisoned by William Afton's actions and by the supernatural consequences of those actions. The children, the murdered innocents whose deaths started everything, deserved better. They deserved to grow up, to live full lives, to die natural deaths in old age. Instead, They were lured away by a man in a rabbit costume and murdered in back rooms. Their souls were bound to metal and machinery, forced to exist in mechanical bodies for years or decades. When they finally attacked people, they attacked the wrong targets, killing innocent night guards while their actual murderer continued living. Their confusion and suffering was profound and prolonged. The attempts to end the cycle, from the spring lock failure that trapped William, to Henry's elaborate fire trap, to the confrontation at the Mega Pizzaplex, showed that some evils are not easily destroyed. William Afton, in particular, demonstrated a persistence that defied death itself. His physical body was destroyed multiple times, but his consciousness, his evil, his influence continued. Whether as Springtrap, as Glitchtrap, or as Burntrap, William refused to truly die, refused to face final justice. The story showed how technology could be corrupted by evil. The animatronics, marvels of engineering and entertainment, became horror icons. The VR technology meant to create safe, contained experiences became a vector for digital possession. The network systems in the Mega Pizzaplex, meant to coordinate sophisticated attractions, became tools for hunting a child. Every technological advance that Fazbear Entertainment implemented was eventually turned toward evil purposes. The story also showed how attempting to hide or ignore evil only allows it to grow. Fazbear Entertainment repeatedly tried to move forward without fully addressing what had happened. They closed locations, rebranded, built new restaurants, created new attractions, but they never truly confronted the core rot at the company's foundation. They built the Mega Pizzaplex literally on top of the old locations rather than excavating and clearing the cursed ground. This approach of covering up rather than cleaning out allowed the evil to persist and resurface. The human cost was staggering. At minimum, 10 children were murdered by William Afton, 5 in the original incident, 5 in the 1987 location. William's own daughter died in Circus Baby. The crying child died in The Bite of '83. Michael Afton died as a scooped corpse that continued walking. Multiple night guards were killed by possessed animatronics across the various locations. The security guard at Fazbear's Fright may have died to Springtrap. The beta tester who encountered Glitchtrap sacrificed their consciousness. The body count across 40+ years of Fazbear Entertainment operations was horrific. But beyond the deaths, there was psychological trauma inflicted on survivors. The night guards who survived their shifts carried memories of being hunted by animatronics that should not move. The families of missing children suffered not knowing what happened to their loved ones. Michael Afton lived with the guilt of killing his brother and the burden of his father's evil. Vanessa experienced possession and loss of control over her own body. Gregory experienced a single night that would traumatize him for life. Glamrock Freddy, if conscious, experienced the horror of his peers being corrupted and destroyed. The psychological cost extended far beyond the direct deaths. The supernatural elements, the possession, the remnant, the persistence beyond death, transformed the story from a crime narrative into something much more disturbing. If the story had been simply about a serial killer who murdered children in restaurants, it would have been terrible but comprehensible. But the added dimension of souls trapped in machines, of consciousness persisting after death, of evil that could digitize and infect living minds, elevated the horror to an existential level. It raised questions about the nature of consciousness, the boundary between life and death, the possibility of souls being trapped forever in mechanical prisons. The ambiguity of the narrative, the fragmentary information, the unanswered questions, the gaps in the timeline, reflected how victims of trauma often experience their own stories. Memories are fragmented. Key information is missing. The full truth is never completely accessible. The children possessing the animatronics did not understand their own situation fully. Michael Afton pieced together his father's crimes gradually. Gregory navigated the Pizzaplex without understanding the full history beneath his feet. This fragmentation made the horror more realistic in some ways, showing how people trapped in nightmarish situations rarely have complete information or clear understanding. The story of Five Nights at Freddy's was not a simple horror story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. It was a complex tragedy spanning decades, involving multiple generations, touching multiple locations, combining human evil with supernatural horror. It showed how one man's actions could echo through time, destroying innocent lives decades after the original crimes. It showed how attempting to build new things on foundations of evil and death would always result in tragedy. It showed how souls could be trapped, how evil could persist, how technology could be corrupted. The ending, if it could be called an ending, remained ambiguous. Gregory escaped the Pizzaplex, but the building remained. Burntrap was attacked by the Blob, but William Afton had survived destruction before. Glitchtrap might still exist in digital space. Vanny might not be the only infected person. The Mega Pizzaplex might be closed, but Fazbear Entertainment might try again. The cycle of tragedy that began in the early 1980 seconds might continue into the future for the children who died, for the souls that were trapped, for the innocent people who became victims of circumstances beyond their control. There was no happy ending. There was only the hope that some found peace, that some were freed from their mechanical prisons, that some measure of justice was achieved when William Afton finally faced consequences for his actions. But even that hope was uncertain, complicated by the supernatural persistence of evil in the world of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The legacy of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was a warning about how entertainment built on flawed foundations, how technology without adequate safety considerations, how corporate negligence and cover-up, and how one person's evil could create generations of suffering. Part 21, The Echoes That Remain. In the aftermath of all the documented events, the world continued to exist with the scars left by Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The physical locations might be closed, burned, or abandoned. But the impact of what happened in those places could never be fully erased. The story lived on in multiple forms, affecting people who never directly experienced the tragedies. The families of the missing children from 1985 and 1987 never received complete closure. Bodies were never formally recovered and returned to them. They never learned the full truth of what happened to their sons and daughters. The official investigations went cold, the restaurants closed, the company moved on. But the parents continued living with the absence of their children, with unanswered questions, with grief that could never be properly resolved because the truth remained hidden. These families existed in a state of permanent uncertainty. Were their children dead? The answer was yes, but they never received official confirmation. Were the children's bodies hidden somewhere in the restaurants? Yes, stuffed into animatronic suits, but this was never officially discovered during the initial investigations. Did the company know something they were not revealing? Almost certainly, but the extent of corporate knowledge versus corporate negligence was never fully exposed. The employees of Fazbear Entertainment across all the locations also carried their own traumas and knowledge. The day shift workers at the 1987 location witnessed the bite of 87, saw an animatronic bite someone's frontal lobe. They knew the animatronics were dangerous even if they did not understand why. The maintenance workers who serviced the animatronics smelled the decay coming from the suits and were told it was just moisture and electronics, but some must have suspected the truth. The phone guy who left messages for night guards at multiple locations knew more than he revealed in his instructions. His messages became progressively more concerned as he worked longer for the company. He knew the animatronics were actively hunting employees. He knew about the spring lock failures. He knew about the bite of 87. He may have known about the missing children. His fate was suggested to be death at the hands of the animatronics, his final phone message consisting only of disturbing noises. This employee tried to help others survive while trapped in a system that put people in danger for minimum wage. The night guards who survived their encounters carried unique trauma. They experienced being hunted by entities that should not move, that were supposed to be entertainment robots. They learned to survive through careful resource management, quick reflexes, and constant vigilance. The hypervigilance developed during those nights, checking cameras constantly, listening for footsteps, watching for movement would not easily fade after their employment ended. They would carry that heightened state of alertness and fear into their daily lives. The first responders who dealt with incidents at the various locations also witnessed things that would haunt them. The paramedics who arrived after the bite of 83 saw a child with catastrophic head trauma from an animatronic's jaws. The firefighters who extinguished the blaze at Fazbear's Fright may have seen Springtrap's burned form among the ruins. The fire crew that responded to Henry's trap encountered the incinerated remains of multiple animatronics with human remains inside them. The police who investigated the missing children cases interviewed grieving families while knowing they had no leads and no answers to provide. The cultural impact. Beyond the direct victims and survivors, the story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza entered cultural consciousness as urban legend and cautionary tale. Even though the full truth was never publicly revealed, enough information leaked that the restaurants became associated with missing children, dangerous animatronics, and mysterious incidents. The locations became sites of dark fascination. Urban explorers might try to access abandoned Freddy Fazbear locations, seeking thrills or evidence. Ghost hunters might investigate, believing the sites to be haunted, and they would be correct, in a sense, given the genuine supernatural activity that occurred there. True crime enthusiasts would research the missing children incidents, creating theories about what happened even without access to the full truth. Children who grew up in areas where Freddy Fazbear locations operated would have memories of the restaurants mixed with knowledge of the disappearances. A place that was supposed to represent fun and entertainment became associated with fear and tragedy. The sight of animatronic characters, even unrelated ones, at other establishments, might trigger unease in people who remembered the Fazbear incidents. The company name itself, Fazbear Entertainment, became toxic. Any attempt to revive the brand or open new locations would be met with protests and concerns. Parents would refuse to bring children to any establishment associated with the company. Investors would avoid the brand due to its history. Employees would be reluctant to work for an organization with such a dark reputation. The Mega Pizzaplex represented perhaps the last gasp of the company's attempt to overcome its past through sheer scale and modernity. But even that ended in disaster with Gregory's experiences. The animatronic entertainment industry as a whole suffered from association with Fazbear Entertainment's failures. Other companies using animatronic characters for entertainment would face increased scrutiny regarding safety measures. Parents would be more cautious about animatronic attractions. Regulations governing animatronic entertainment would likely be strengthened in response to the incidents, particularly regarding spring-lock suits and animatronics' freedom of movement. The story also entered the realm of media and entertainment in the form of the Help Wanted VR game. This represented an attempt to monetize the dark history, turning tragedy into horror entertainment. The developers who created the game initially believed they were making a fictional horror experience based on urban legends. They did not realize they were working with genuinely haunted materials until Glitchtrap manifested. The game's release meant that the story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza reached a global audience, people who experienced simulated versions of the Night Guard's terror without understanding they were encountering fragments of real supernatural evil. The philosophical questions. The events at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza raised profound philosophical and theological questions that defied easy answers. The existence of possession, remnant, and souls bound to machinery challenged conventional understanding of consciousness, death, and the afterlife. If human souls could be bound to animatronic suits, what did that mean about the nature of consciousness? Was consciousness purely biological, based in the brain? Or was there something separate, a soul or essence that could exist apart from biological tissue? The children's souls clearly retained some form of awareness and identity after death, suggesting consciousness could persist independently of the body. But the consciousness of the possessed animatronics was distorted and confused. The children did not retain full clarity about their deaths or their killers. They exhibited behaviors that mixed childlike confusion with animatronic programming. This suggested that consciousness bound to machinery was altered by its new vessel, that the mechanical nature of the animatronics influenced how the children's souls expressed themselves. The question of identity became complex. Was Circus Baby truly William's daughter, or was she a combination of the daughter's soul and the animatronics programming? When multiple souls were bound to a single animatronic like Molten Freddy, did they maintain separate identities or merge into something new? When Ennard wore Michael's corpse, was it Michael or Ennard, or both simultaneously? The persistence of William Afton's consciousness raised darker questions. He retained full memories and intelligence after becoming Springtrap, unlike the confused children. He could transfer into digital space as Glitch Trap. He could return in physical form as Burn Trap. Was this because his death occurred as an adult with a fully developed consciousness? Was it because he had deep understanding of Remnant and used that knowledge to preserve himself? Or was evil itself more persistent than innocence, able to cling to existence through sheer malevolence? The nature of Remnant as a substance defied scientific explanation. It seemed to be created through traumatic death in proximity to machinery. Infused with the emotions of fear and pain, it could be extracted, transferred, injected, and apparently even digitized. But was it truly a physical substance that obeyed consistent rules? Or was it purely supernatural, operating on metaphysical principles that science could never fully understand? The existence of a purgatory-like state, as suggested by Ultimate Custom Night, raised questions about justice and punishment after death. William Afton was trapped in a realm of endless torment, attacked by manifestations of his victims and his crimes. This suggested some form of cosmic justice or supernatural karma. But who or what created that space? Was it Cassidy's will alone, the vengeful spirit forcing Afton into personalized hell? Was it a natural consequence of Afton's evil, the universe itself punishing him? Or was it Henry's design, somehow persisting after the physical fire? The suffering of innocent souls raised theodicy questions. If there was any form of higher power or cosmic justice in this universe, why were children allowed to be murdered and trapped in mechanical bodies for decades? Why did their souls not immediately move on to whatever afterlife awaited them? The puppet, possessed by Henry's daughter, tried to give the other children life through possession, but this gift was actually a curse. The theological implications of souls being trapped in a state between life and death, unable to find peace, suggested either the absence of benevolent higher powers or the existence of metaphysical rules that even such powers could not override. The corporate evil. While William Afton was the primary source of evil in the narrative, Fazbear Entertainment as a corporation bore significant responsibility for enabling and continuing the tragedies. The company's decisions, priorities, and cover-ups created conditions where Afton's evil could flourish and persist across decades. The initial design of the Springlock suits showed prioritization of novelty and cost-effectiveness over safety. These suits were inherently dangerous, requiring precise conditions to function safely. The risk of Springlock failure was known. Training tapes existed warning employees about moisture, sudden movements, and proper procedures. Yet the company continued using these suits despite the danger. When failures occurred, including the one that killed William Afton, the company's response was to seal the safe rooms and hide the evidence rather than properly investigate or compensate victims. After the missing children incident in 1985, the company faced a choice: close permanently and cooperate fully with investigations, or minimize damage and attempt to continue operations. They chose the latter. The animatronics were not thoroughly examined for human remains. The investigation was allowed to go cold. The company settled on a narrative that protected their liability and brand value, rather than one that provided truth and justice for victims' families. The decision to keep the old animatronics in service despite their condition and behavior showed negligence bordering on criminal. Management knew the animatronics moved at night. They knew employees were uncomfortable around them. They knew about the smell of decay. They created the night guard position, knowing these guards would be in danger, paying minimum wage for a job that regularly resulted in death or disappearance. The employment of night guards was essentially sacrificing low-wage workers to protect property while avoiding the cost of proper security measures or decommissioning dangerous equipment. The 1,987 location with the toy animatronics represented another failure. The company invested in new technology and facial recognition systems, but still could not prevent William Afton from using their facility to murder more children. When the bite of 87 occurred, the company's response was to close the location and scrap the expensive new animatronics rather than implement genuine safety reforms. The attempt to franchise the brand through the pizzeria simulator showed the company's willingness to pass risk to independent operators. By creating a franchise system, Fazbear Entertainment could distance itself from direct liability while still profiting from the brand. The participant who unknowingly gathered all the haunted animatronics was essentially manipulated by both Henry and the corporation into creating the conditions for Henry's trap. The development and release of the Help Wanted VR game demonstrated the company's desire to monetize even its dark history. Fazbear Entertainment hired developers to create entertainment based on the very incidents that had destroyed lives. This showed remarkable callousness toward victims and their families. The company's failure to properly vet the materials provided to developers, materials that contained genuine supernatural contamination, resulted in Glitchtrap's release. The company either did not know Remnant could be digitized, which showed negligence, or did know and did not care about the risk, which showed malevolence. The construction of the Mega Pizzaplex on top of the old locations was perhaps the company's most egregious decision. Rather than excavating the cursed ground, removing the remnants of previous tragedies, and building on clean land, they literally paved over the past. The underground sections containing old animatronic parts, remnants of Circus Baby's facility, and evidence of murders were left in place beneath the new attraction. This decision prioritized cost savings and construction speed over addressing the supernatural contamination of the site. The corporate structure of Fazbear Entertainment allowed responsibility to be diffused. Individual employees like the phone guy or the technicians at various locations were just following orders, doing jobs they needed to survive economically. Middle management implemented policies from above. Upper management made decisions based on financial considerations. Shareholders cared only about profit and brand value. No single person in the corporate hierarchy bore full responsibility, yet the collective decisions created and perpetuated an environment where children died and evil persisted. The company's approach to public relations after each incident followed a pattern: minimize, deflect, rebrand, continue. Never was there full transparency about what had happened. Never was there genuine accountability. The pattern suggested that corporate Fazbear Entertainment viewed human lives as acceptable losses in pursuit of profit, or at minimum as less important than preserving the company and brand. The generational curse. One of the most tragic aspects of the Freddy Fazbear story was how each generation inherited the sins and consequences of the previous generation. The curse, initiated by William Afton's actions in the 1980 seconds, continued to claim victims decades later, long after most people had forgotten or never knew the original crimes. The first generation consisted of William Afton, Henry Emily, and their families. William's actions directly killed Henry's daughter, multiple children at the restaurants, and eventually his own daughter through Circus Baby. William's younger son died in the bite of '83, partly due to William's negligent parenting and creation of terrifying animatronics. Henry's entire life was destroyed by his partner's evil, leading to decades of guilt, research, and eventually his suicide in the fire trap he created. This generation created the curse through William's evil and through Henry's well-intentioned but flawed inventions. The second generation consisted of Michael Afton and the murdered children. Michael bore the guilt of killing his brother and spent his life trying to undo his father's evil. He was killed at Circus Baby's facility, but continued existing as a walking corpse, driven by determination to stop William. The murdered children's souls were trapped for decades, denied peace, denied justice, forced to exist in confused suffering inside animatronic bodies. This generation paid for the sins of their fathers, but had committed no wrong themselves. The third generation consisted of the night guards at various locations in the 1990 seconds through early 2000s. Mike Schmidt and others took jobs that seemed simple, but put them in mortal danger. They were attacked by possessed animatronics because dead children confused them with the murderer. They faced death for minimum wage, often with no understanding of why the animatronics were hostile. This generation suffered consequences without any connection to the original crimes, beyond being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The fourth generation consisted of people involved with the VR game and the Pizzaplex. The beta tester, game developers, Vanessa, and others encountered evil that had evolved into digital form. They faced William Afton's evil not as a physical threat, but as a corrupting presence in code and consciousness. Vanessa was possessed and forced to become Vanny. The beta testers sacrificed their consciousness trying to contain Glitchtrap. This generation dealt with evil that had adapted and found new vectors for harm. The fifth generation was Gregory, and children who encountered the Pizzaplex. Gregory was hunted through a building he had no connection to, pursued by animatronics corrupted by a digital ghost of a murderer who had died before Gregory was born. He faced consequences of events from 40 years prior without having any knowledge of that history. This generation represented the ultimate victims of inherited sin, children suffering for crimes committed before they existed. Each generation faced horror that originated from William Afton's actions in the 1,980 seconds. The evil did not diminish over time. It adapted, evolved, and found new victims. The supernatural nature of the possessions meant that the curse was not limited by normal temporal boundaries. Souls trapped in animatronics could remain conscious for decades. Remnant could be preserved, transferred, and digitized. William Afton's consciousness could persist through multiple destructions of his physical form. The generational curse also affected the locations themselves. Each new Freddy Fazbear establishment was built on the foundation of previous failures, sometimes literally. The Pizzaplex was constructed on top of the old locations, physically layering new entertainment over old graves. This created a palimpsest of tragedy, where each layer contained its own horrors but was also connected to the layers above and below. Digging deep enough in the Pizzaplex led to discovering the history that the company wanted to bury. The curse extended to the animatronic characters themselves. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and the others were redesigned and rebuilt across generations, but they always retained the essential forms that had been used to trap children's souls. The glam rock versions at the Pizzaplex were modern interpretations of the classic characters, but they too became corrupted as if the curse attached to the character concepts themselves rather than just to specific physical suits. Breaking the generational curse required more than simply stopping William Afton. It required releasing all the trapped souls, destroying all remnant, purging the digital corruption, and likely shutting down Fazbear Entertainment permanently. Henry's fire trap attempted to do this, but only partially succeeded. The Pizzaplex confrontation between Gregory, Vanessa, Freddy, and Burntrap might have accomplished more, but the outcome remained uncertain. The question was whether the curse could ever truly end, or whether it would continue finding new victims in new forms forever. The price of knowledge. Throughout the Five Nights at Freddy's narrative, knowledge itself carried a terrible price. Those who learned the truth about what happened at the restaurants, about the possessions, about William Afton's crimes, found that this knowledge damaged them in fundamental ways. Henry Emily's knowledge was perhaps the most comprehensive and the most devastating. He understood that his business partner had murdered children. He understood that his own daughter's soul was trapped in the puppet. He understood the mechanics of remnant and possession enough to create a trap designed to release the souls through fire. But this knowledge destroyed him. He spent decades researching, planning, living with guilt about his creations being used for evil in his daughter's trapped state. His final act was suicide by fire, joining the possessed animatronics in death because he could not continue living with what he knew. Michael Afton's knowledge drove his entire existence after his brother's death. He learned that his father was a murderer. He learned about the possessed animatronics. He learned enough to track his father through multiple locations, to work at the facilities where supernatural horror occurred, to eventually collaborate with Henry on the fire trap. This knowledge gave him purpose, but also ensured he could never have a normal life. He existed as a walking corpse, driven by mission rather than by normal human desires. His knowledge made him a ghost pursuing another ghost. The phone guy's increasing knowledge led to his apparent death. His early messages were casual and helpful. As he worked longer for the company, his messages became more concerned, more aware of genuine danger. He knew about the spring lock failures. He knew the animatronics were actively hunting employees. He knew about incidents that management wanted hidden. His knowledge made him complicit in a system that endangered people, and eventually that system killed him. His final message consisting of the sounds of his death. The night guards gained knowledge through survival. Each night shift taught them that the animatronics were not just malfunctioning robots, but active threats with apparent intelligence and purpose. The guards learned patterns, behaviors, and tactics for survival. But they could never learn why the animatronics were hostile, because the truth was hidden from them. Their knowledge was sufficient to survive, but insufficient to understand, leaving them with trauma from experiences they could not fully explain. The beta tester who encountered Glitchtrap gained knowledge that forced them to make an impossible choice. They learned that the VR game contained genuine, supernatural corruption. They understood that Glitchtrap was attempting to escape into the physical world through possession of players. They realized that standard debugging or quarantine procedures would not work against an entity that could manipulate code from within. Their knowledge led them to fragment their own consciousness in an attempt to trap Glitchtrap, sacrificing their sense of self to contain evil they were never meant to encounter. Vanessa's knowledge came through being possessed by Glitchtrap. When not fully controlled, she presumably retained awareness of what Vanny did while using her body. She knew she was being used to hunt Gregory. She knew the rabbit costume she wore was connected to William Afton's crimes. She knew she was being forced to serve evil against her will. This knowledge of her own violation, of being used as a weapon while partially aware, would create trauma that normal therapy could never address, because the situation was beyond normal human experience. Gregory gained knowledge through his night in the Pizzaplex. He learned that Glamrock Freddy was genuinely protective, while the other animatronics were corrupted. He learned that Vanessa transformed into Vanny. He learned about the underground sections and the history buried beneath the entertainment complex. He saw Burntrap and confronted William Afton's latest manifestation. For a child, this knowledge would be overwhelming, fundamentally altering his understanding of reality and safety. The world revealed itself to be much darker and more dangerous than any child should have to know. The families of murdered children were denied knowledge, and this denial caused its own suffering. They never learned what truly happened to their sons and daughters. They never got bodies to bury. They never received explanations. This absence of knowledge created a different kind of torture, the not knowing, the permanent uncertainty, the inability to achieve closure because the truth remained hidden. In some ways, the family's suffering from lack of knowledge was worse than the suffering of those who knew too much. Knowledge in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe was consistently portrayed as dangerous and damaging. Those who learned the truth could never unlearn it, could never return to innocence. The knowledge demanded action Henry had to create his fire trap, Michael had to hunt his father, the beta tester had to sacrifice themselves, but taking action based on this knowledge rarely led to happy outcomes. Knowledge brought responsibility, guilt, and the burden of deciding what to do with terrible truths. The price of knowledge extended beyond individuals to society. If the full truth about Freddy Fazbear's Pizza became public knowledge, if people learned that children's souls were genuinely trapped in animatronics, that a man achieved a form of digital immortality through supernatural means, that Remnant could bind consciousness to machinery, that possession and supernatural evil were real, it would fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of death, consciousness, and reality itself. The existence of the supernatural in a world that believed itself governed purely by natural laws would be revolutionary and terrifying. Perhaps this was why the truth remained hidden, why the company covered up incidents, why the full story was never publicly revealed. Some knowledge was too dangerous for widespread dissemination. The final truth. After examining the complete chronological timeline, the multiple locations, the many victims, and the persistent evil of William Afton, certain truths became undeniable about the Five Nights at Freddy's story. The first truth was that evil had won far more often than good. William Afton murdered at least 10 children across multiple incidents. He evaded capture and punishment for years. Even when the Springlocks failed and should have killed him, he persisted as Springtrap. Even when burned in the Fazbear's Fright fire, he survived. Even when burned in Henry's elaborate trap, his consciousness persisted. He adapted from physical form to digital form to hybrid form. He corrupted living people like Vanessa. He haunted locations decades after his crimes. His evil accomplished far more than the combined efforts of those who opposed him. The second truth was that innocent suffering vastly outweighed any justice achieved. The murdered children suffered terribly. First, the trauma and pain of being killed, then decades of confused existence trapped in animatronic bodies, then the torment of attacking innocent people while unable to remember or reach their true killer. Henry's daughter suffered similar imprisonment in The Puppet. William's daughter died and was trapped in Circus Baby. Michael existed as a walking corpse. Night guards were killed by possessed animatronics. Families lost children without ever learning the truth. The scale of innocent suffering was immense compared to whatever punishment William Afton received. The third truth was that attempts to fix or end the tragedy consistently failed or only partially succeeded. Henry's fire trap was the most elaborate attempt to end everything, and it failed to fully destroy William Afton's consciousness. It may have released some souls, but created new problems when Afton persisted in digital and eventually physical form. Michael's lifelong mission to undo his father's evil ended with his death in Henry's trap, and his father survived anyway. The confrontation at the Pizzaplex might have stopped Burntrap, but left questions about whether Glitchtrap was eliminated. The fourth truth was that the past could not be buried or escaped. Every attempt to move forward, to create new locations, to rebrand and restart, failed because the foundation was corrupt. Building the Pizzaplex on top of old locations literally demonstrated this. The past was directly beneath the surface, and digging deep enough would always uncover it. The company's history could not be erased through new attractions or modern technology. The curse persisted regardless of how many years passed or how many times the company attempted to reinvent itself. The fifth truth was that corporate greed enabled and perpetuated the tragedy. Fazbear Entertainment's prioritization of profit over safety, its cover-ups of incidents, its willingness to endanger employees and customers, its exploitation of its own dark history for entertainment value. All of these decisions created conditions where William Afton's evil could flourish and persist. The company was not simply an innocent victim of a rogue employee. Its structure, priorities, and decisions made it complicit in decades of suffering. The sixth truth was that the supernatural elements were real within this universe and operated by consistent, if mysterious, rules. Souls could be bound to animatronics through remnant. Possession was genuine and persistent. William Afton's consciousness could transfer between physical and digital forms. The puppet could give life to other spirits. Golden Freddy could manifest in ways other possessed animatronics could not. These supernatural phenomena were not hallucinations or malfunctions, but actual violations of normal physical laws, suggesting the Five Nights at Freddy's universe operated under different metaphysical rules than our reality. The seventh truth was that knowledge and awareness did not guarantee safety or success. Henry understood remnant and possession, but still lost his daughter and eventually his life. Michael knew about his father's crimes, but still became a victim at Circus Baby's facility. The beta tester recognized Glitchtrap's nature, but could only contain it at the cost of their own consciousness. Vanessa was aware of being controlled, but could not prevent Glitchtrap from using her body. Knowledge provided understanding, but not power to change outcomes. The eighth truth was that the story had no clean resolution. Unlike conventional narratives with clear endings where good triumphs and evil is vanquished, the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline ended with ambiguity and uncertainty. William Afton might be destroyed, or he might persist in some form. Glitchtrap might be eliminated, or it might still exist in the network. The released souls might have found peace, or some might still be trapped. Gregory escaped, but the Pizzaplex might rebuild. The cycle might be broken, or it might simply be dormant, waiting to resume. The lack of definitive closure reflected how real tragedies often lack neat resolutions. The ninth truth was that the animatronics themselves were the most tragic figures in the narrative. They were created to bring joy but became instruments and prisons of suffering. They were possessed by murdered children but attacked innocent people. They were built with care and impressive engineering but were corrupted by evil beyond their creators' intentions. The animatronics represented how tools and technology could be twisted far from their original purpose, how the innocent could be transformed into threats, how victims could become perpetrators through circumstances beyond their control. The 10th and final truth was that the Five Nights at Freddy's story was fundamentally about the persistence of evil and the cost of attempting to contain or destroy it. William Afton's evil, once unleashed, proved nearly impossible to eliminate. It spread through remnant, through possessions, through digital corruption, through generational curses, Every effort to stop it required sacrifice. Henry's suicide, Michael's prolonged suffering and death, the beta tester's fragmentation, Vanessa's possession, Gregory's traumatic night. The evil demanded payment from those who opposed it, and the price was always high. The story suggested that some evils, once created, might never be fully destroyed, only transferred, contained, or made dormant at tremendous cost. These truths painted a dark picture of a universe where good intentions led to horrible outcomes, where evil persisted despite heroic opposition, where innocent suffering was the norm rather than the exception. It was a universe where children's souls could be trapped for decades, where a murderer could defy death multiple times, where corporate greed enabled supernatural horror, where technology amplified rather than solved problems. But within this darkness, there were also moments of genuine heroism and compassion. The puppet tried to help other murdered children by giving them life, even though this trapped them. Michael devoted his existence to stopping his father despite impossible odds. Henry created his fire trap knowing he would die in it. Glamrock Freddy protected Gregory when every other animatronic was corrupted. The beta testers sacrificed their consciousness to contain Glitch Trap. These acts of courage and self-sacrifice, though they did not create happy endings, demonstrated that even in a universe defined by persistent evil and innocent suffering, individuals could still choose to fight back, to protect others, to sacrifice themselves in pursuit of something better. The complete story of Five Nights at Freddy's, from the bite of '83 to Gregory's escape from the Pizzaplex, spanning over 40 years of tragedies, possessions, murders, and supernatural horror, was ultimately a testament to how evil can echo through generations, and how the price of opposing it is paid by the innocent. Thanks for spending your time here. If you enjoyed this FNAF story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Lore to Sleep 2 videos. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you in the next one.